so I'll tell you when it's actually starting.
It says we're live.
It's on.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah, does everyone want to quickly introduce themselves? Looks like Callie's on the very far left of my screen. If we just go Callie, Melissa, one from Infinity, Peebles, Demetrius, then Zoe, and myself.
Cool. Hi, I'm Carly Pest. Isn't it weird introducing yourself by like an internet name? It sounds super fucking pretentious. It's nice to be here with you all.
Very good. And are you debating the GC side or the QT side today?
I'm fucking fully sat on the fence at the moment. I'm feeling a bit appalled by the kind of by the GC sort of arguments at the moment on the board, but I'm like, yo, yeah, gender's a social construct, so let's see where I end up. Ooh, it'll be a journey.
Sounds fantastic. Melissa, why don't you give it a shot?
I go by Melissa on the internet, not in real life. Do you have actual questions for me to speak to here? Because I don't really have much to say.
Tell us what your favorite color is.
I am trans, but I have a lot of GC sympathetic views. So I don't know. I also tend to be someone who doesn't necessarily have solid opinions, but I think that's because I think that's just because I don't know enough to actually have those opinions.
Well, fair enough. I think all of us are here to maybe learn a little bit more.
Yeah.
So, one from, why don't you tell us who you are, what you're about?
Sure. So I'm one from Rum, and I'm a radical feminist, and I'm trans as well. Trans feminine, to be specific. And yeah, I guess that's pretty much it.
All right. Now, are you GC or QT?
GC.
All right. Beautiful. And Infinite Guy, little what is that? A praying mantis?
Oh, yeah. So I'm snarky, and I'm female to male on the TT side.
Very nice. Peebles, go ahead.
Oh, I'm the Princess O Bubblegum. I am trans positive. I support transgender people. I am one. So.
All right. Very well put.
I don't have much else to say there. I'm the crazy communist on the sub.
I gotcha. Go ahead, Demetrius.
Well, yeah, that's my name. Parish Coda. Disposable Tag actually invited me to this, so I would definitely fall further under GC and QT. And yeah, I'm out of things to say.
It looks like we got more of a GC representation, but that's all right. Zoe?
Yeah, I'm Zoe.
I'll tell you that, moderator. You need to like rein us trans people in, because otherwise we're gonna outspeak them.
All right, I gotcha.
I'm Zoe. I go by that with my friends and on the internet. Sometimes not. I go by Cats Are Good People on the subreddits. So yeah, I'm pretty not gender critical at all. I'm anti-gender critical. That's what I'm gonna say my stance is. I'm an egalitarian, so I think that people should just all. I'm the egalitarian type that I think we all should just get along and hug. And honestly, even though we can't hug because we're on the internet, I think we should have one big internet hug, both before and after this.
Sounds good to me. Looks like we're going to be holding down the extreme side, the extreme position. So that's fantastic.
I'm also extreme, so.
Extreme hugging.
Yeah, extreme hugging. No, fight me. Someone.
Jesus Christ, do you
Wrestling
want
is
to
just
hug or
hugging.
do you want to fight? Make up your mind.
It's like I'm like, bro, I can be tough, but I really can't. It's my secret.
I can be your angel or your devil.
That is the worst meme in the world.
So, any idea which question we should all tackle first?
Go with the most upvoted one. Like, go sort it by most upvoted and do that. That's like the most democratic way to do it.
Yeah, that's what I figured. The first one is, I kind of want to save that for later. It's just about how the subreddit is kind of running out of topics to discuss. And
Oh, okay.
so I'm thinking,
Up to your discretion. You're the moderator, so.
I don't know. I kind of like the idea of starting
here's a
with
good one.
that.
And this is one I was kind of interested in having the group go over. So this is submitted from the Majestic Flap Flap, and it says, some trans people have said their dysphoria does stem from past trauma. Should the past trauma be dealt with before transition to ensure no regrets, or should the dysphoria be dealt with first to make dealing with the past trauma easier by alleviating a major stressor? So
doesn't that question assume that transition is not a way of dealing with the past trauma, when transition might be an effective way of dealing with?
I think their question means that they're trying to say that, in our opinion, would the past trauma be better dealt with first or during transition? Or maybe your answer can be dysphoria does like go, or that the past trauma goes away after the or not goes away, but those negative effects of it.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really get rid of a trauma, can you? It's something that's happened to you, but you know, it's something that happened, but the problem is the spin-off from the trauma, you know, the sort of the things that happen in your life and the symptoms that you get because of the trauma. And if transition's an effective way of dealing with, of resolving those sort of symptoms that you get as a result of trauma, then why do we have to should there be a separate mechanism? Does that make sense? Do you see what I'm saying?
It does make sense. I'd like to come in and maybe give the question a little bit more direction and kind of add another dimension to it. So when we talk about sex and gender, we're normally talking about, well, two different things. I think everyone can probably agree with that. You know, gender is being sort of a psychological phenomena and sex as being a physiological phenomena. I think trauma can be thought of in the same manner. So you can have things that are physically traumatic to you and things that are maybe mentally or emotionally traumatic to you. And I think in some ways, I mean, there's a difference between the two. I don't know in particular whether there is an inclination statistically of transgender people to have had a physical trauma or a psychological trauma affecting maybe their gender identity. But it's something to consider when maybe tackling this question. Sorry to get excessively verbose.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. I think it's...
I just want to...
One thing I wanted to say, this entire topic reminds me, do you got any of you remember the documentary by the Canadian psychologist on transgender youth? It was posted a while back, 6 months ago.
Zucker?
Was that the
Zucker? Is that
transgender children knows best or something like that? I think I have it on my computer.
Whatever it was, they pretty much
the
had
UK.
this whole thing.
Or
They
in the
wanted
US.
to investigate the reasons why people were transgender children transitioned in the first place, if it was caused by trauma or other psychological issues. And while I can sympathize with that and agree with that, there was a whole issue that I found that was confirmation bias. That they were looking for problems rather than just letting the problems come up by themselves. That was my main issue with it.
Guys, can I just quickly say, if you're chatting on here and you've got the sound from the chat coming out of your speakers rather than into headphones, it creates like an echo on
That might be me. Let me find some
the
headphones.
audio.
Get some earbuds.
Yeah, you got to whack earbuds in or something.
Right, if you just give me a sec, I'll find some.
Any thoughts on what I just said? I don't know.
Oh, I didn't want to like interrupt at all. So, I don't know. I feel like in mixed minds about the question. I feel like you should just deal with stuff in the order you want to deal with it, right?
I think that's fair. I think
I
there's
feel
going
like-
to be a lot of individual difference, isn't there?
Yeah, so like I for sure have plenty of past traumas I should probably deal with, but I just kind of ignore them. But
Don't
you
we
know,
all?
yeah, I think that's half of life, right? You just like, yeah.
Part of
and
the
I-
issue of going to the psychologist is almost always they diagnose you with something. I know when I was diagnosed with gender dysphoria, I was also diagnosed with avoidant personality disorder.
Well, but
So
I
it's
think
kind of like you get go into one, get two free kind of thing.
diagnoses normally do travel in pairs and sets. So, like, if you have one, you know, mental illness or mental disorder, it's more likely that you have others, I believe.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, I believe that's correct.
yeah. So I think y'all want to move on to the next question, since I don't think there's many people, unless someone wants to say something.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? The assumption that transgenderism might arise from past trauma. Do you guys that are trans in here sort of like, do you buy into that notion at all?
Not really, to be honest. Like, at all.
I believe it's possible, but like not necessarily in the majority of cases, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I, on a personal level, I mean, I would say I would completely believe if it was something like you have, there's possibly genetic backups for gender dysphoria that, like, you know, you have a gene that makes you more likely to experience gender dysphoria, and then, you know, traumas can make you even more likely to express it. But there's not enough research to really say whether that's other mental, you know, problems work that way.
My internet just messed up, so I missed Callie's question. Was it on the cause of dysphoria?
Yeah, it was just sort of the question from the Majestic Flat. I can't be doing with saying internet names in real life. It's mental. The question sort of assumes that trauma could be like a cause of transgenderism, and I just wondered how the trans people here sort of feel about that notion.
I mean,
I think it's possible, but I don't think it's like a real big concern. As I said, the Zucker thing did bring up that it sometimes does happen, and they screen for it. And I think that's important to screen for it. I don't think it's the common thing. It's kind of like also transgender people going, like, it might have been gay men, they're trying to like get with straight men kind of thing. Like, it like happens, but it's not common in any aspect.
I have a suspicion that it may be both like physical and need something to help it come out, because like just as an example, like I did like a little survey on people, and all right, you know, it was of a specific group and whatever, but like half the people, over half the people said that they had experienced abuse in childhood. Like more than 50% of this group of trans people, there are 138, experienced abuse in childhood. That's just mental. That blew my mind.
That's a lot, isn't it?
It might be over-reporting.
It might be. It might be way over, but
you also have to consider
it also
selection.
depends. What is like the definition of abuse? Because like I know my parents did like corporal punishment, and by some definitions that's abuse, but it's not like they like locked me away in like a thing or like tormented me for years or anything like that. Unfortunately, it's a standard thing.
I took the same definitions that were used in the official UK statistics. I can't remember what that came out of as doing, but it wasn't 50%.
There might be a chicken and an egg thing there as well, where it's like, you know, a lot of a lot of parents might be like quite homophobic and might be sort of like more hostile to their child if their child is presenting as gender non-conforming.
All right. Thank you.
That's a good point.
I took that to mean maybe transgender people are bad, and that's why they get abused.
No. I meant the parents are bad, not the kids. Jesus Christ, I'm not a monster.
Obviously, all trans people should be abused until the trans gets out of them. Like,
yes, that's the way to cure them.
I think I did actually separate it out in like whether they had experienced things before and whether they experienced things after, and even before transition, before they'd come out, before everything. So many people were saying that they had experienced things. It was mental.
It's interesting. There might be a connection, but I don't think we can really say.
Yeah, I don't think we can really say is a good like sum up of the entire thing. We don't have enough knowledge on anything at the moment.
And the other thing is how relevant is
sorry, Apple blessed.
How relevant is it at the end of the day, you know? I mean, how it happens, it happens.
Yeah, I see you on that.
I agree with that too. Like, even if it comes from abuse, that doesn't mean transition isn't the correct path forward.
Exactly.
But I mean, as far as the actual question of whether that ought to be addressed first, it seems to make sense that if there's a chance that addressing it first means you don't end up having to transition, it seems like that would be the better option, no?
Yeah, I'd say ideally, yes.
I'm reminded also of a story I heard of a gay man who came out after he got in a car crash. It was like he had to like reevaluate his whole life.
Ooh.
And I'm kind of reminded like that because I know for me, I came out about 4 months after I smashed my face. I couldn't like eat because my teeth were broken. These two. And so I like sat there for a month just like evaluating my existence and my life. And I wonder if like also because just like traumatic events make you think of these things, if it has any connection that way.
Yeah, that it's a reflection point and a sort of like you realize that your life is actually quite frail and that you don't want to waste it sort of living in a way where you feel concealed and inauthentic.
Frail mortals.
We will all die, so let's be gay now.
I think honestly, instead of like being gay, we all should just have one big orgy, and that's all the world should be.
That's not fair to the
same user that was saying we should all have a big internet hug, because I don't think this chat is that sort of thing, you know.
All right.
Well, we got off topic. That was my goal, so I did it.
Yeah, there you go. Should we move on to the next question, maybe?
Probably. We're talking about orgies now.
Listen, maybe I should leave because y'all aren't my kind of people. If y'all can't at least have one discussion about orgies and how the world.
Jesus Christ, you guys! You're just gonna get all the GC people on the subject.
I know.
Deviants, burn them.
All right. One from this question is up next. Actually, you were interested in discussing a two typology blancardism.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
Let me get my shit posting profile up.
No, I just thought it'd be interesting to talk about because it's been getting a lot of attention in the subreddit recently, and it's always fun to discuss.
So did you maybe want to elaborate on it a little bit? Give us your thoughts.
Oh, my thoughts? I think the actual typology more or less holds in the majority of cases.
If you don't mind, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I am not at all familiar with blancardism. You know,
there's like several definitions I've heard of, so it might be good to go over it.
So yeah, if you could maybe explain to us what it is, what you mean by it, and what it describes, I suppose.
Yeah, so like in general, there's two types of trans people as theorized by Blanchard. The first being homosexual transsexuals. And for instance, this would be a gay natal male is a trans woman, right? And they usually transition very young, mostly for social reasons. And yeah, that's one type. The other type is later transitioning straight natal males or gay trans women. And they represent the other type. And then it's theorized that they exist through like erotic target, what's it called? Erotic target fixation error. Yeah. Which is like through fetish, basically. A long developed fetish.
Sounds like a computer game, doesn't it?
It does.
Location error.
But
guys, I'm gonna make the game. Do y'all want to play it? I'll get coding like right away.
Is there an app?
I don't know.
for
I always found the whole thing to be kind of nonsensical. Like, I transitioned pretty young, at least for old transgender standards, compared to people who transition when they're 40. But at the same time, I also had the fetish at some level. So it's like, and then I'm bisexual on top of that, sorta. So it's like, what the heck? I don't map to this thing whatsoever in any aspect.
yeah, like my own personal opinions on the thing is that the typology more or less holds, but the reasoning is a lot more fuzzy to me. It's not because people are just super gay or people are fetishists. But I do believe the typology.
That's a completely different thing.
But I do believe the typology generally holds because trans people usually do fall into those two groups. Phenotypically, not their desire to transition or whatever.
I don't know. Like, I mean,
my theory is I'm just.
Oh, you go.
I'm just so trans. I'm transsexual. I'm attracted to the trans people, and I got the fetish. I got the whole package.
Bingo. You win.
Listen, can I be honest? Traps are probably the only thing I live for, but that's a side note.
See, like, here we go. There's so much fetishism already.
Yeah, but I'm pansexual. I transitioned at a really young age, 18, which is young compared to like the people who transition at like 40, I think already mentioned. That was the first time I could. I would have done it a lot earlier if I could have, because, you know, I live in the South.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it fucks you up.
I just find with the Blanchardine thing that it's really, I mean, how it just does it with sexuality, that if you're this sexuality, you're in this group. It just makes no sense. Like, I'm bisexual, but on every other aspect of it, I would fit in the homosexual, transsexual group. But I don't count because I'm bisexual, and they've got this completely, in my opinion, bullshit description of why the groups came about, which means that they try and fit people into groups. So because I'm bisexual, I have to be fetishistic, but I'm not.
Well, here's another thing. I think we also have to establish that I know a lot of people with fetishes. I've yet to meet anyone who has a fetish and gets like anxiety, panic attacks, or even depressed because of their fetish in any way. Like, so I
don't want to like step on your toes, but I'm sure like some pedophiles do because they're depressed or threatened by their fetish.
That is fair. But isn't that for them, it would be more of a social thing, like the...
But you could argue that being trans is mostly social.
Not for me. At a young age, I was like, what the fuck is this thing between my legs? I want it gone. Why it just dangled there? What'd it do? So...
I sometimes wonder what the line is between sort of... between what we call fetish and what we sort of just accept to be kind of like normal sexuality. Like, you know, I think if you went back like 50 years or possibly not even that much, people would describe homosexuality as a fetish.
Well, it's not even that. Like, lingerie is technically a fetish.
Yeah,
Also,
Callie, I
yeah.
think makes a very good point because to some degree, I think the idea of fetishization is socially constructed.
That's
also,
true.
I know people who think like blowjobs are fetishy.
What?
So I've heard people try to make that argument before.
I have seen GPs on the subs say anal sex is a fetish.
Well, then I'm pretty fetishistic. But like, okay, but like, even if it is fetishistic, that doesn't mean it's like morally or ethically wrong. Does that make sense? Like, there's a stigma around fetishes, but that doesn't mean they're inherently negative.
I think it comes from a lot of the GC people, and maybe someone can say otherwise, but I feel like a bit of GC is kind of sex negative. And there are some people who are GC who have, No, I don't know. I've just seen more sex negative on the GC side than anything.
I agree that. I think that was one of the things where I was like, whoa, I can't really get fully behind this GC sort of ideology. Sex is good, man.
It is.
It's going on YouTube, isn't it? That's not bad.
Not that I don't necessarily even think like I'm sex positive. Obviously, I was just talking about a planet-wide orgy earlier. So, but like I can still respect people that are sex negative, right? Especially the GC reason, which is normally that.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of respect a part of it. It's not like they're like, oh yeah, sex is for like heathens. It's they think that women are socialized to, give in to men, which that's an issue for another day. We'll talk about.
Yeah, what we have to keep out of it as well is women that are on that side that have come to that sort of mindset because they've been through sort of horrible traumatic experiences and abuse. Them, I understand where they're coming from and how that trauma feeds into their attitude towards sex.
Yeah, and like I said, I think there are very few debates I can really say that one side is right. It's at the end of the day more relativism and whatnot.
See, I've actually become more sex negative over the past year.
Really?
I wouldn't say I'm fully there. It's kind of like being a Marxist, I've come to realize that like all work is exploitative. And then I like map that to sex work and I'm like, holy shit, that is really fucked up.
Oh yeah.
See, but I know, okay, so I personally know two people, one who is doing, they both work in like sex work basically, right? But they do like the light stuff.
It's kind of like,
huh? So what I was saying was I know someone who does sex work and they would be pretty offended by the like thought that they didn't choose to do it themselves, right?
But that doesn't make it right. Just because it offends them.
I think, but they made a decision to do it, right? And I support anyone's decision to what they want to do, basically, as long as it doesn't like hurt others. That's where I draw my line, personally.
Yeah,
so,
I'm with you on that because my big thing is body autonomy, and if someone's in charge of their own body, I have no say about whether they start selling that.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of the point Peebles was making was that even if they do choose to engage in sex work voluntarily, it still is probably exploitive to some degree in that the person is selling their body to someone else. But I would say that the relationship with the relative to the exploitation is reciprocal. So a person may be exploited by selling their body, but they're also exploiting someone's desire to have sex, essentially.
Yeah. There does, yeah, and
happiness.
Yeah, get out of here, you filthy Marxist.
The piece of this though is like consent. Like,
yeah,
like can you buy consent? And if you're in a situation where it's like, I would not have sex with you unless there was money involved, like, is that?
I think it comes to who puts it on the table, right?
Then, like, I would not have sex with you unless that gun at my head wasn't involved. You know what I mean? Like, it's there is money a coercive force, basically.
Okay, but
yeah,
I think
that's a good question.
I think we have to talk about this thing, right? It's not like if, let's say I wanted to sell my sexy body, right, on the street. I'm going out there and making a decision to go sell my body, right? That would be like me walking up to someone and being like, put a gun to my head. And then once they do it, I'm like, now I'll have sex with you, you know?
By the way,
No, but if the only other option is homelessness or starvation, then you do have a gun to your head. And it's exploitative.
And this is the problem, I think, that when we talk about sex work, we're actually talking about some very disparate experiences. You know, it's there are people in the sex industry in a certain way, and there are people.
Oh, someone dropped out.
Parish is gone. Parish has perished.
Whoa!
Can we have a funeral?
What side was Parish?
Hopefully they'll come back in a minute.
Do you kill them? Is this like you being like trying to cover it up? Hopefully they come back. I totally didn't murder them.
What side were they on? Were they GC?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hold on. I need to. But by the way, before I go into my Reddit email, we're off the Blanchardian topic, right?
Yeah,
I suppose so.
Yeah.
I let it go because it seemed like we were discussing some interesting stuff.
Yeah, I like
I
the
know there was
sex
a question on sex and sex work stuff later on in that thread, so I wasn't bothering it. It's just I wanted to make sure we were off the Blanchardian thing.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to say something about it before we go, or before we, you know.
I don't have anything else to say.
All right. I think it's dumb, but if you want to do it and put people in those categories, more power.
I was gonna try and bring the conversation around a little bit when we can relate sex work, I think, back to GC and QT issues. Just given that transgender people, as far as pornography goes, say, you know, I think happen to be, my understanding is transgender people have a sort of greater inclination to being exploited sexually in one way or another through, you know, just the sex work industry.
I won't even lie. I think there is well, you have to remember that trans people there are quite a few homeless trans people, right? And then there are quite a few people who kind of have a fetish for trans people. Not that that's wrong. You can have a fetish for whatever you want, right? I guess. As long as both people are willing and know that you're like, oh yeah, I'm fucking you because you're trans. I think it's kind of shitty otherwise, but that trans people have a disproportionate, you know, rate of being homeless, and that's probably why they do the work that's considered what desperate people do.
Right.
They're more likely to be in those situations.
And there's other, you know, very vulnerable groups that are overrepresented in prostitution and sex work. I think.
Yeah, you can find that
would probably agree with me. You know, when we think about the high numbers of women that were abused as children and women that have issues with drugs and alcohol that are, you know, within the sex industry. There's definitely, you know, vulnerable groups are overrepresented in this industry because it exploits vulnerable people. And I know sometimes it's the only thing that's accessible to them because of their position in society. Parish is back!
Oh, there we go.
Oh my God!
Resurrected from the dead!
Yes. As I said before, my internet's not been great.
It's okay, we mourned.
Oh,
I lit the funeral pyro. We'll have to like put it out.
So Parish, One from Run, and Caliplist are GC, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Ish.
Yeah.
Well, whatever. It's I can only get the lukewarm GCs here.
Yeah.
Trans fascism almost showed up. I would have been really excited.
I know. I wanted them to.
Also, Missy was thinking about showing up.
Yeah,
that would have been cool.
Yeah, but apparently they had kids.
Yeah, she has kids, but you know, maybe she'll get in on next time because it'll be fun to talk to.
Get rid of those kids.
I'm like, hell, bring the kids. They can chat as well. It's all good.
No, I'm not PG. I'm sorry.
Plus, we're like discussing sex work, so.
I know, it might kind of curtail our conversation and make us all more civilized.
Actually, I personally believe, and maybe this can be a topic of discussion, I don't think you should hide stuff from kids. Just tell them the way the world is.
Yeah, but they have to be old enough to know how to process the messages they're getting. Like if you feed them a hip hop song that glorifies like, violence and drug use and exploitation, and they don't actually recognize the satire or the, just what the actual right and wrong in the song is. I mean, you have to at least explain to your kids what you're exposing them to in terms of
I think if your kid at a certain age doesn't understand that like murder is wrong, you've kind of messed up as a parent in some.
I mean, it doesn't have to be murder, though. I mean, and to some extent, I mean, honestly, like, it depends on what age we're talking here. But like, when you're like 5 years old, you still are basically learning the things that build up to being a nonviolent person.
I don't know. I guess. I think that is an interesting discussion I've seen about people saying like, are kids born without like I'm gonna be honest, I don't think I've ever had a killer in me. Like I don't think I could have ever killed anyone.
I think everyone is capable of killing people, given the right circumstances.
I as a person will break before like I could ever kill like another human. Like I would let them kill me. I'm talking
I bet you if you had 20 years of your life lined up perfectly, you could be led to kill someone.
I don't know.
I think part of the issue is, as far as socializing children goes, earlier in the hangout, we were discussing child abuse. And I mean, to some degree, if you're an abused child and your parent tells you that it's wrong to hurt other people, well, then you have a sort of inherent contradiction going on there.
That's what happened. But what happened with me was when my dad hit me, I realized being hit isn't fun. I don't want to be hit, and thus I'll never hit other people because when you do stuff, you invite, the same behavior back at you.
But victims of child abuse are more likely to be abusers in the future.
But that's like the theory that they fall back onto all that they know, right? Like when they raise a kid, they don't all they know is the abusive way to raise a kid.
People that have been abused don't always recognize the abuse that they went through as abuse.
Yeah.
And if you don't recognize it as abuse, then you might then go on to demonstrate those behaviors because you haven't acknowledged them as abusive, I think is the sort of theory behind that, as far as I understand.
Well, and on top of that, people who a lot of people who are abusive have things like borderline or narcissistic personality disorder, which go down the family chain as well.
And attachment disorders as well that make it hard to empathize and
Yeah. Well, I guess that is fair to say that they didn't recognize the abuse, but I also think there's a bit of it of like they recognize that the abuse was wrong when it was happening to them, but then like when they do it to their kid, they're like, I went through it, and look at me, I turned out all right, says my dad, who is basically everything I don't want to be.
There is a thing I've seen people talk about quite a bit, which is when you've got parents who have been in a very abusive situation, they have their kids in a less abusive situation but still abusive, and they recognize that it was abuse what they had, but because they are doing it lesser, they don't recognize what they are doing as abusive because it's not as bad as they had it.
Yeah.
Each generation, one punch less.
Yeah, one. No, my dad always had if it's closed hand, it doesn't count. No, if it's open hand. So
in some ways that is disgusting, but another way is like people used to treat their kids like really bad back in the day. They'd like tie them to like sticks in their backyard.
Yeah, see, that's fucked up.
So like it's kind of like I could understand the whole the notion of I'm gonna punch my kid less hard kind of thing. But
I'm gonna pull my.
You're punching the kid, but
I actually really love this theory of like every generation is slowly pulling its punches.
So
you know what? We'll eventually things will end up good that way, right?
Yeah.
It might take a while.
Years.
I think people are just more likely to switch forms of abuse because then they become emotionally abusive rather than physically because they don't.
Yeah, and then their kid becomes physical abuse to their right, and it's just a cycle.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, if that's not what you're posing, then you're putting forth.
I can understand that. However, I'm still I'm kind of a person who I think physical abuse is really bad. Like, I don't think they're comparable. Like, the times I've been assaulted outweigh me being picked on. Like, it still hurts, but it's different.
I mean, emotional abuse. Yeah. Someone else go.
Like, I mean, I feel like
if you don't mind, I'd like to jump in really quickly because we've kind of gone off track a little bit of on abuse, and I want to kind of redirect it towards something more related to GC and QT issues.
Yeah.
So I was thinking while I've been hearing everybody talk, at least it seems to me that there seems to be more of an inclination of males to adopt transgender identities than females, and there have been a couple of questions asking us to discuss the issue of brain sex. So basically, my question is that I'd like maybe us to sort of go over is whether or not males and females may experience abuse differently from one another as it pertains to their sort of brain sex, different, structures or physiological differences within the brain, and also if perhaps the reason why more males and females adopt transgender identities, could it be related to them maybe experiencing abuse at a greater rate in aggregate than
well, I disagree with the premise. Did you see the 2015 transgender survey?
Go ahead.
In the 2015 transgender survey, female assigned at birth transgender people actually outweighed the male assigned at birth for transgender people. I think it was like 53 to 47, which
I wasn't aware.
Wasn't that new referrals though?
What?
New referrals to a particular clinic?
No, that was a general online survey. Anyone in the United States could take that.
I remember that being reported in the UK as well.
Yeah, but I think aren't assigned female at birth people more likely to identify as like non-binary?
Yeah, it was 80% of female assigned at birth transgender people identified as non-binary. But
okay.
They're still. I still think they're transgender. I'm like true trans in the absolute sense. Like even the non-binaries are transgender.
As I've talked to non-binary people, I used to be more of a like, if you don't feel dysphoria, you aren't trans. But then as I talk to more non-binary people, I quickly realized that a lot of them do feel like just a lesser dysphoria. They just don't put the name on it, right?
Yeah, I agree with that.
About.
Also be
I actually think there's internalized transphobia, because they have like this notion that like dysphoria has to be like, I want to cut off my dick, but like it could be just like, I want softer skin and I hate my facial hair kind of thing.
I've had to cut off my dick thought a few times.
At the same time, though, I don't think it would be unfair to say that. Oh, I was going to say, at the same time, I don't think it would be unfair to say that a lot of it really is social based. If you look at, well, not to drag Tumblr into it, but I'm going to drag Tumblr into it. If you go and look for people on Tumblr, like the vast majority of it is going to be things that are all like social issues, all talking about how, oh, I never felt right because I was attracted to girls or because I wanted to wear pants. And those do make up for a considerable number of people.
Tumblr is a vocal minority. In the transgender community, I have yet to meet such people. And I literally dated a non-binary Tumblr user. and they still were rather rational.
Same.
Parish, do you feel like from that that some of the women who were now identifying as non-binary are doing so sort of out of a desire to kind of break away from restrictive female gender roles and rules and presentations rather than a sort of sense of actually being transgender or dysphoria? Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, I think that would probably be the case for, I'd say definitely more than 50%.
I don't like putting fake percentages on stuff because
Those are the SMBC thing. Like 80% of statistics are made up, and it's just made up.
Yeah.
I see where you're coming from with that, but I'm just not convinced that being kind of like a gender non-conforming female or like a not very girly girl is that taboo and that unaccepted that it necessitates kind of relabeling your gender.
Especially since non-binary people get so much crap from the transgender community in general.
I see, but
like it's not like you're even identifying out of any kind of oppression because you're going into more oppressed group.
I don't know. I've seen some people that really harped on tomboys, and it's a rather common thing. I haven't even like searched it out. It just like comes up. Like you meet like kids in the grocery store, and they'll be like picked on because they chose like the wrong thing by their parents.
Yeah.
You see it all the time.
I see. My thing is, I don't know. I grew up in the South, but so like there are some weird gender roles there, but for the most part, tomboys were pretty accepted, right?
Well, same where I grew up, and I accept that there's going to be differences because, like, I'm European, and you guys are like American.
I'm Canadian.
I'm Canadian.
Near enough.
USA.
Shut up.
I actually think nationality and national pride is like the dumbest thing ever. But,
oh yeah.
I don't know, man.
Absolutely.
I really like
Very imperialistic.
Do tomboys really get like so kind of like badly treated though that it pushes them to redefine their gender identity nowadays? I don't know, man.
I mean,
I think
I would say there's. Sorry, am I interrupting someone?
You go. I'll go after you.
Oh, sorry about that. No, I was going to say, I think it kind of breaks up into two parts. Because on the one hand, there's the direct issue of actual, like, straight up mistreatment, which will vary based on when you live or where you live.
Yeah.
Like, when I lived in Austin, it wasn't a problem. When I moved to a smaller town further north, it became a bigger problem when it was noted.
Yeah, I think
But
that's
I think that there's also the issue of it not really being a conscious, how much abuse will I receive for doing X versus how much will I do for being Y?
Exactly.
I think that in a considerable number of cases, it's just kind of, oh, I'm doing X, X is unacceptable, Y is an alternative, and without actually consciously thinking of like a cost-benefit analysis, they just go with Y because, hey, it's not X, right?
Yeah. You can have feelings and not know where they come from.
I guess I can see that. I don't know, but for most people I've met, there are some people who claim to only feel social dysphoria, and I don't know how I feel about those people myself. I mean, personally, I always take my default opinion on any issue is do what makes you happy. So if transitioning is what's going to make you happy, you do it.
I don't know if I agree with that.
I completely agree with that.
I'm not a utilitarian, so I don't value happiness. I know that sounds awful.
I think it's all we can value in this fucked up world we live in.
I mean, at the same time,
point is there is.
Because you'll have like people who will be like, yeah, I want to, as I said earlier, there's like gay men who want to transition so they could be with straight guys kind of thing.
But I would argue that that's the majority of like trans women, so.
Well, I don't think that's the case, but in any case, I don't I don't think that that should really be a thing that's permitted, because most of the time when I've come across these people, like a year or two later, they'll be rather messed up mentally because they shouldn't have been transitioning.
See, but that's where I take the stance of maybe you should, and this is what already happens. Like, fuck, I even did informed consent for my hormones, but they still tell you, like, hey, this could really fuck you up.
Oh yeah, the medicine we take is like really nasty. Like, I cannot take this stuff flippantly.
It's not as bad as like some things. Like, honestly, it's not as bad as like the antidepressants I took that didn't even work.
You take finasteride?
No.
I take finasteride.
Probably Spyro.
Finasteride, if a female-born person touches that in its crushed form, any pregnancy they have will resort in birth deformities.
Oh, I had an acne medicine I took.
Woman touch my medication in any aspect because it will mess them up for the rest of their life.
I don't know. Yeah.
See, this on my GC side of things, this does concern me because, like, I mean, hearing you guys, that's not a gendered term. It's just like, guys.
I get it. Guys is a gender neutral term. Anyone who says otherwise is dumb.
Hearing y'all talk about like how actually the transition drugs can be quite hard going, I'm not sure that that's the message that strongly comes out of the trans community online, and that young people who are considering transitioning, I'm not sure they're hearing that. I'm not sure that's being communicated as clearly as it could be.
In any talk of hormones, other than the like do-it-yourself people, which is people that's a discussion for another day. I do see a lot of hormones have their risks. And I even see the trans community, like GC commonly says the trans community doesn't talk about these transitioners. You go to Ask Trans and there's like a post today about it that gets upvoted.
Yeah. Do you think that's a misrepresentation then of the trans community, that they're not talking about the hard parts of transition and the risks of transition?
Oh, that's all that's talked about most of the time.
That's interesting.
I think
oh yeah. Well, it's kind of like it's one of those things where if you actually go to a transgender like group, it's like all they talk about. Like we talk about like our medication and like needles. It's kind of weird actually, but like it's one of those things where if you actually are trans and you go to the things, you're like, oh, this actually is talked about. It's just not something you see online because it's not interesting and it's kind of depressing.
Yeah.
I think it really depends on the groups because, I mean, if you're in a group that's mainly post-transition, then people are talking about their post-transition experiences. But when people are mainly pre-transition, things don't seem to come out so much. So I mean, I've seen people saying that so testosterone does a lot of changes that are permanent. So like my voice started changing like a week into it, and people were saying, oh, just if you're not sure about transitioning, just go on hormones for a few months and try it out. It's like, what?
See, but that's more for trans women. Trans men have it a lot rougher with like the permanent effects of testosterone.
There's a lot of people who don't acknowledge things, and there's a lot of people who with detransitioners will not really acknowledge that people do it, and will be really quite mean to detransitioners.
That said, I don't like support like crazy gatekeeping because most of the gatekeeping done psychologically is really sexist. It's not actually based on anything like scientific. It's kind of like, oh, you haven't worn a skirt enough, so I'm not prescribing you hormones this year, kind of thing. It's really messed up.
I pretended to be heterosexual because
same. I am, but
that used to be
see, y'all should have hopped on. I got on that informed consent bandwagon, and I got my hormones that way. They made me sign my soul away, but after that, I got them.
Yeah.
And my firstborn child, but jokes on them, I'm not going to have children.
I just want to say on something earlier about the non-binary things. Callie asked whether tomboys and things were really that that bad an experience that they would go on. A lot of what I've seen of when people get really into, it's not necessarily non-binary, because there are non-binaries who are like complete dysphoric, and there are people who are binary who are in the category of people I'm talking about. But there are a fair number of these people in situations where people are quite accepting of trans people. That's where I see it come out. When people are accepting of trans people, it's very liberal and such. Then you get a lot of people saying, "Oh, I'm trans because I don't identify with societal roles," even though they don't need to transition. That's where all of that starts really popping up from what I've seen.
Well, you're bringing up an interesting issue at this point, and I think it might be good for us to maybe move on to another question. And the one I would bring up would be the one submitted by Disposable Tag, which deals with a discussion around the definitions of certain words that we commonly use. So like gender or gender identity or gender dysphoria. The word I'm most interested at this point would be non-binary. What does that mean, and how can we sort of, I don't know, construct some sort of criteria by which we can maybe definitively say, yes, someone is or isn't non-binary, and is it up to us to even decide on such a thing?
That's a good question, Lard.
I kind of view non-binary as like, how do I put this? They're like the bisexuals of the transgender community. They feel some level of gender dysphoria, but not like a full wave like binary people do.
I disagree.
Okay. I know that there's some people that when I made this definition have pointed out that by that I might be not non-binary myself, which I don't know how to feel about. I'm like non-op myself, so it's kind of like, yeah.
I would disagree from the other end, because I would consider myself non-binary, but I mean, I guess I'm not suicidally dysphoric, but still, I definitely don't want a dick.
Yeah.
Other such things.
Oh, you fake trans.
I didn't hear what you said. Sorry, you're not cut out.
Oh, at what point did it go out?
I heard you, so I don't know.
It's the whole thing.
So those of you that are in here that consider yourselves to be non-binary, like what does that mean to you? How do you define that in relation to yourself?
I think for me, like I almost did start out pretty binary. I started out, I do remember wanting to be actually trans so I could be a woman, and then finally believing it that like I am a woman. And then kind of coming out the other end, like kind of realizing just how much gender stuff had been kind of like gender role stuff had been like steeped in my brain. And then coming out of that, realizing like, okay, I really don't give a shit whether I'm a man or a woman. I'll do what I want to do and be how I want to be. And that sounds great. Like I'm on my way to being a GNC man, but I still hate my dick. And, still trans. So like it's like all my social dysphoria and all that, that's absolutely gone. I'm called a guy every day at work and everything. I don't.
Yeah, me too. I'm misgendered all the time. I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I'm medicated, so now I don't care. I know that sounds weird, but for me.
Yeah.
That kind of makes more sense to me. It's sort of like it's a label that recognizes your dysphoria, but doesn't, but sort of recognizes that you just need to be you as an individual and not fit into the sex binary.
Yeah, sometimes I have to like remember. It's kind of like people that are bipolar need to take like their medication. I think it's called lithium, right?
Yeah.
And they'll be tempted to not take it because they won't feel those kind of things anymore, but they still have to, because the second they go off it, they become was it manic again? I'm not sure of the term. Harris
is perished.
Yeah, I'm reuniting the funeral pyro.
Rest in peace.
Do you any of y'all have last word? Huh?
Anyway,
Yeah.
Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of like my dysphoria has gone down a lot ever since medication, to the point where I have to be like, yes, I have to take my medication or else I'm gonna feel weird today.
I used to have like 3 panic attacks, like severe panic attacks. Like I have to stop what I'm doing for maybe, a few minutes to like hours before I got on hormones. So that was my life.
Do you guys think that like this transgender thing is a thing?
Yeah, I was gonna ask a similar question related to Milo Stewart and Riley Dennis, possibly. What the sort of everyone's opinion on those 2 characters are.
I think Milo is legit. I don't know enough about Riley Dennis. I just hear stuff about them. I've never really paid attention. Milo has maybe not explicitly said they had gender dysphoria, but the way they talk about it seems to indicate it.
Milo also just takes a very extreme opinion, and kind of like the other Milo on the other side of that.
It's not actually extreme if you know what they're talking about.
I disagree with Milo on some stuff, but that's a different story for a different day. I think the way they say it, though, definitely.
Oh yeah, it's a really shitty way to say it. Like, because there's different definitions. Like when they said like black people can't be racist, like they're referring to a different definition of racism, which is systematic racism, which
which
I really don't need to talk with regular people about it.
You need to
clarify. I just saw someone very young making that video, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think Milo's sort of youth and confusion and you get very sort of like passionate about things when you're that age and you're just learning about them. It was a pretty unnuanced view, but I don't think we could demonize Milo for that, given Milo's age and context.
I don't like to pile on Milo because they've been piled on by like every rationalist, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Right.
It's pretty much abuse at this point. Because they're a high schooler and they had like millions of videos, like videos.
They had, I get it. I think everyone knows what you're saying.
Yeah.
About the.
One thing that I personally find sort of bothers me to some degree about both Milo and Riley, and as their identities sort of relate to the overall transgender phenomena. It's a class issue for me, and it seems like both of them come from fairly privileged backgrounds, at least relative to how I was raised. And I don't know, to some degree, I suppose I maybe fallaciously generalize the transgender community as a whole as maybe coming from more sort of middle class backgrounds. I don't think that's true, although there might be some truth to it to a limited degree. I'm just wondering if anyone has any thoughts about that.
I don't know. I kind of find that analysis to be it's kind of like communists who are against gay people because gayness is a bourgeois decadence. It's kind of like, no, that's not it at all.
Right.
I know Emma Goldman actually had to explain that to several Bolsheviks, lay it out like, no, they are not just not bourgeois decadency. It's a thing.
What did I miss?
But I'm more of the view that I was actually talking about this the other day. That trenders are harmless. They don't do anything. For example, who identifies as genderqueer. But I've never seen them do anything whatsoever and talk about their relation to gender at all. It's just a word they use sometimes.
There's lots of miseducation that I've seen pushed.
They don't really talk about it. It's just a word they have vocabulary that they use to describe themselves. And it's kind of like let's say worst case scenario, they're wrong, but they aren't doing anything. It's just kind of existing. I don't know. Being in the transgender community, it's like when you actually like meet these people, it's like, oh, they're not doing any harm. They're just existing.
Even the worst, the ones who are wrong, The ones who are wrong are just kind of going through a phase to figure themselves out, and I can never say that's a bad thing.
The miseducation they're pushing has quite a clear effect on people I've talked to who would have otherwise been more understanding of things. Even if the people, they're not against trans people, but because of their miseducation, they just have a bunch of ideas and have to be like, no, that's not the way it is for me. That might be the way it is for those people over there who just they don't identify with the social gender roles, but that's not the situation for me.
I don't know. I think it's a vocal minority, and when it becomes, because sometimes you'll have campus authorities that will start going at this, but I think it's more of a problem of how do I put this, like liberalism than anything else. Like it's kind of just like,
I don't think we need to deconstruct all the problems with modern liberalism.
Yeah,
well, I suppose part of the issue might be people who don't have maybe the same degree of privilege to get on the internet and post a video about their identity or in one kind or another. Those people won't be seen. The only people who will be doing stuff like Riley Dennis and Milo do are the people who have access to that sort of platform.
I mean, most people have access to the internet nowadays, let's be honest.
I actually watched a video by anarcho-communist about how to make a video, and it's apparently easier than you think it is. The issue isn't making the video. The issue is actually getting views on the video, which could take years to actually build a base. Or anyone gives a shit about
time, I would say as well. Time is another resource that someone who's poor is not going to have a lot of. I'm in the middle of trying to get a video out on YouTube myself right now, and it's taken me tons and tons of hours, and if I didn't have the free time, I wouldn't be able to do it ever.
Like even the simplest videos can take like weeks.
Yeah,
that's true.
Know.
But like, there's also the fact that like non-binary identities and stuff on YouTube are more popular because they are controversial.
Yeah, and YouTube loves controversy. Keep in mind, it takes a upvote and a downvote as the same thing in its algorithm to judge.
Good thing I have this unlisted, or else this might balloon up. I'm not joking here. There are literally 3 other videos of this sort that exist on the internet.
Yeah, I want my voice to cover the whole world.
We're all going to be internet famous. We can quit our jobs and live on an island and drink Mai Tais all day.
And we can just have discussions. Yeah. We can call it.
It'll be like Lord of the Flies.
2 of them were by I can't remember her name. There's this famous radical feminist, gender critical person who the transgender community always rips on, but apparently she actually debated 2 people in 2 videos.
Jermaine Greer, maybe?
What?
Jermaine Greer?
No, younger. In any case, and the other one was someone debating with the Equal Rights Advocate, which actually posted on our sub a while back. They're a weird one though. They're like a transgender MGTOW. I don't.
Can I say, on like a level of how cute they are, MGTOWs are pretty adorbs. About how they're a movement.
Explain that statement. Explain that statement to us.
Most of them, they're a movement of men who couldn't get laid enough. So like a petulant child, they were like, all right, I don't want you anyways.
I don't really know MGTOWs that much, but I think are they like soft incels?
Huh?
They're like incels that have given up hope.
That's rough.
So I think they're kind of cute in like the where we don't want you anyways kind of way. Of course, some of them are pretty sexist, but that's beside the point.
Incels are usually super crazy sexist.
Yep.
Most MGTOWs are probably in the more MRA movement kind of stuff, which I don't know.
I'm the resident MRA-ish person in the subreddit.
Honestly, I don't have a problem with most of like MRA claims about like the problem men face. I don't have a problem with. It's when they start being like, and thus feminism is shitty, that I have a problem with it. But I have the same problem with feminism, with like them being like, you know, I don't know.
Yeah,
sometimes
we have to separate the
It was
ideas
them
of like,
feminists
you know,
being
the
like,
basic
I don't know,
ideas.
you know.
Feminism and the MRM should be the biggest of allies because they're dealing with the same problem. They're just the two different sides of the coin, and yet both sides cannot stand the other side, and it's really frustrating.
Yeah, and that's what I don't like. I wish those two sides could get along because but it's like the oppression Olympics. They're like, no, men have more problems.
Have any of you seen the Red Pill yet? Not the subreddit, but the movie?
I haven't.
No.
Is it worth seeing if anyone has?
I have no idea. I haven't seen it myself, but I really want to.
What's quite interesting though about that dynamic that Snarky just mentioned about them being the two sides of the same coin is I agree, and I find it quite interesting that, you know, feminists and feminism are often told, well, you should be pushing for like, if you want to solve these issues for women, then you have to push for men's rights too. But nobody's turning around to the men's rights activists and saying like, well, if you want to solve these issues for men, then you have to solve these issues for women too. Do you sort of agree with that?
That's what everyone is doing to the MRAs. They're saying, no, you shouldn't be talking about men's issues. If you deal with women's issues, it will solve your issues magically.
Oh, well, it's good to know it's going both ways.
Yeah, and I've been someone who's been in both communities, right? Because the anti-SJW community has a lot of MRA overlap, right?
Yeah.
So, and then I also have hung out a bit on Ask Trans, which is a very more left-leaning subreddit with, you know, so I don't know. I've seen, and also gender cynical. Whatever. My words are failing me. It's okay. Both sides hate each other, and they actually just mirror each other beautifully. They're basically perfect mirrors of each other, and it's kind of honestly great in some ways, and terrible. That's why I identify as egalitarian, because having seen both sides, I'm like, guys, just look at each other and just get along, and then if you'll work together, you'll have more power to do both of your issues.
That's something that comes up quite a lot, actually, isn't it? Like, I remember when Fuzzy was on the forum and her saying that actually trans women and feminists should be really good allies. The trans community and feminists should be really good allies, and there was like a lot of pushback against that from the GC posters.
Historically, there actually has been. Before some events in the 70s with the transsexual empire, a lot of radical feminists and transgender people were very strong allies. There's like, I can't remember, if anyone asked me, I could find it and actually post it, but it's an interesting thing I've seen about it. It might be a bit of propaganda, but there definitely were people back in the day who did do that, who were, it's kind of like transgender plus gender critical unite.
What do you think has changed? So what changed? Why is it so hostile now?
Pretty much the existence of the transsexual empire, the book. That did the damage that I guess we're still seeing to this very day.
Okay,
and I guess if you want to argue, I guess there's probably some transgender people pissed off some radical feminists back in the 70s to cause that book to exist. So I guess blame could go both ways, but.
Can I also say that, for one, I think both sides have their people who are problematic, but I do say the gender critical side does sometimes attract people who aren't actually gender critical, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
And there's been some alt-right people appearing around recently.
Yeah, and not that I don't, and I just, maybe we could do a conversation about something like that, about how, like, both sides kind of attract certain groups that maybe aren't the best desirable or the most desirables. But I think you get that with any extreme. I don't know.
So while we're on this sort of subject, I kind of posted my questions a little late to the thread calling for questions for this hangout. I did have one that's somewhat related to this issue, and so it's the following. Feminists often criticize certain aspects of masculinity as being toxic. Given that, I think transgender people are more often men. Do you think, this was written before, obviously, you've corrected me on that. Do you think toxic male cultural stereotypes play a factor in the construction of male to female transgender identities? And more broadly, do you think the absence of positive gender non-conforming male role models in Western culture is a contributing factor to the rise in male to female transgenderism? Also, is there a such thing as non-toxic or healthy masculinity, and what would that look like? Can you think of a person or fictional character that would embody that image?
Can you just say the question again? It was a bit long and I couldn't follow.
I was going to read it. I was going to go read it because I'm better at reading than I am like.
Right. So basically, I'll maybe explain it. My personal feelings about it. It seems to me, at least in my experience growing up as a boy, as a young man, there was a absence in my life of having any sort of positive male role model to sort of look up to and model myself after. It seemed like a lot of my friends would be modeling themselves after, I think it's come up a little bit earlier, gangster rappers, like Eminem or Dr. Dre or that sort of thing. I live in the West Coast in California, so that's sort of the norm out here. And it just seemed to me that a lot of more positive sort of masculine, quote unquote, so to speak, behavior would often be sort of shamed. I was a very dorky and sort of nerdy kid, always good at math and science. And, I wasn't necessarily popular in school for that sort of thing. So,
oh yeah, sorry, I found the person. I looking up.
Hey, the chat's saying stuff, by the way, and so if someone wants to, I'm reading it half-passively, but I don't want to interrupt the conversation with what the chat's saying. No offense, chat. I love you. All of you.
It was just something that was a while back. It was Kathy Brennan. Brennan actually had 2 transgender debates. You could probably find you could find on YouTube. That's the name of the person, which I kind of find amusing. What?
I've heard that name. She's quite controversial, isn't she? I've seen her being slated on Gender Cynical.
Yeah, which is kind of ironic because when I've actually heard her debate transgender people, in actuality, she seems rather chill, which is, I don't know how to, it's kind of weird actually.
She seems chill, but I still disagree with her.
Well, yeah.
I don't think she deserves all the heat she gets, but I don't think anyone deserves all the heat they get on Gender Cynical.
Oh no, I think there are a few which definitely deserve it. There have been literal Stormfront, literal, how do I put this? Literal feminist Nazis on that sub.
Okay, but I mean, people who actually don't hide behind an you know what I mean? At the point that you actually put your name out there, some of them aren't that bad.
Well, yeah.
Most of them, it's people. I don't know. I think there are some, obviously, people who get, shit they kind of deserve. But I don't know.
The thing that annoys me about the gender critical sub is more along the lines of crazy shit is said, and a lot of the time no one ever really challenges it. And it gets I know it's not a good metric, upvotes, but it'll get 20 upvotes, and everyone just giving them golf claps or saying transgender people are cockroaches.
Well, okay, I think one of the problems with the subreddit is, and a problem and half of its purpose is that it isn't a debate sub, right? They don't, and I think this is okay to have a sub that's not about discussion, right? In a, more their discussion is, let's laugh at these gender critical people, right? And that's what they want to talk about, and that's their, right to talk about. I feel like.
I actually that is one thing I actually don't like about gender cynical is the moderation. I wish
Oh,
that
but I have to say something
stuff.
on this. I was very recently temporarily banned from gender cynical. The main reason being that I'm a big poster on GCdebatesQT.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, I post on both, and maybe it's because I don't know. I don't know.
Get banned for
Maybe it's
that.
because
I
I'm
have
the team on that stuff, so they don't feel the need to ban me.
I was banned from it ages ago because indecisive trans child, whose posts I actually find quite funny, like most of the time, said that it was outrageous that I was pretending to be a moderate. So I got banned. I was like, no,
burn the moderate.
See, but I think they shouldn't ban people, but I think it is fair to say, if you want to, like, just say, hey, this isn't the place for discussion, I'm deleting your comments, but, you know, like...
But there's a difference between discussion as in discussing, like, the nature of transgenderism stuff and discussion as in saying, oh, actually, I think you might be misrepresenting that person's post a little bit. And, you know... I think the same problem on gender critical.
To be fair, I did get like voted down massively for saying that Flap Your Wings is not like the worst mod ever. So, and that like I'd be okay for like, there's a lot of gender, a few months back, Gender Cynical was talking about starting a new debate sub that was a little more moderated than the current one. I think it fell through basically on all fronts.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, if we want a gender critical mod, I always say that Flap Your Wings is pretty, you know, okay. They don't like over moderate on either side.
I think that she's very good at separating her own posts from her mod posts, which is something that, you know, I've seen other mods kind of like not do.
I mean, I still disagree with her, but I think that she's
got a tough job there. You know?
Yeah, and I could see people making an argument that she favors gender critical, but at the same time, I
think she favors it a little bit, but that's just a natural bias.
The thing is, though, that sometimes, you know, when those really hideous posts that say, you know, all trans people are sort of narcissistic perverts, when they do go unmoderated, that I've come to sort of see that as a positive thing, really, because then they're left there, they're not deleted, and the ugliness is there for everyone to see.
Yeah.
I think they should at least be censored, though.
I've had no issue with the moderation on the sub, our sub, the GC Debates QT. I've been suspended once by accident because there's this weird thing where I and other transgender people can say whatever the heck we want. Like I could violate the rules. I could say MTT and FTT. I could say tranny.
You can't say turf.
Honestly,
yeah, I can't say that. All the other ones, and one of the moderators mistaked me as a GC, so they clamped down.
Honestly, like I want to be able to say like I enjoy saying tranny, and like I call myself a tranny a lot. I kind of like taking back the word, I guess is what the more activist circles would call it, but I don't know. I do it sometimes, especially with my friends, right? They're going to be like, oh, but your opinion doesn't matter because you're a tranny. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's fair.
The problem is there's so many people that are against it, and I can understand why they're against it. Like, all you have to do is watch, like, one old, like Maury, and any other those shows where, like, bring in people, and then they have, like, a debate and have, like, the fraternity test shit. Yeah. They use that word all the time, and a lot of, well, you could very easily see it. There's a lot of people who are very bigoted and who will say that word very negatively. I can see why they want to do that.
I think the word tranny is about as respectful and appropriate as the word faggot.
But I like the word.
So whether or not you will think that that's a good word to be reclaimed,
I don't know. I think some people use the word faggot, and I don't. I think it depends. I've always been a personal believer in like a word. When you're saying it aloud, it also has a lot of like how you say it matters a lot. So I'm not like, you know, fucking faggots. I want them to all burn in fucking hell. You know,
that's gonna be the quote.
Tone it down a bit. I don't want this video to be like TikTok.
Trust me, I've heard worse on YouTube. That's fine. Worst thing comes to worst, we're gonna like Vimeo.
It's true that language is very sort of like dependent on context, and I think there's a lot of nuance with language, and sometimes that's lost in the conversations on the sub that are about, you know, how we use the word woman, and so, that it seeks a very definite definition and fails to recognize the nuance of how we do use language.
Yeah. Speaking of which, how many of you have read the Trans Girl Diary thing? I like to post them quite a bit.
I think I read a little of. I think I read them all because that's just the kind of fucking person I am, right?
Well, because they were made back in the mid 2000s, even early 2000s. And they use the word tranny a lot for modern standards. And I've when I introduce it to people, I've had several people be like, "No, I can't read this. It's just too much." But like, it was written by transgender people, and it was kind of like a word that was a lot more acceptable to use at the time. And it was just like, "Hey, my tranny, what's up?"
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it depends on the person who's hearing it. No.
Yeah. It's just something I found interesting.
It's with any word. I wouldn't say it in certain communities. If it bothers someone, I'm not going to say it, right? At the end of the day, I think that I don't want to upset people, so...
I will say, personally, I think I use the word tranny myself just because I'm really lazy and don't want to say transgender. It's one
the syllables.
That's why you say trans. It's so much easier.
That's true. But
and I think you can dodge the gender part.
What if you want to multiply trans? You have to say transies, and it's like
trans people.
Like, transes are coming.
Transes.
Yes.
No, it needs a Z. So it's like the plural is instead of an S, it's a Z. Obviously, that's how you plural.
Transes.
Yeah, it is.
Is this trans? Is this?
Yeah, that's how it's done. I'm telling you.
Is you a trans?
I don't know, but on a
you could
personal
just do
level,
like the fashion singular or the fashion plural, where you're like, "That's a really good trouser. That's a really good shoe." You know, instead of like, "Those are really good shoes."
if I didn't already know that you.
Of course, the whole issue is I think there are people who are genuinely transphobic, and so whenever they hear someone else use the word tranny, it sort of what's the word I'm looking for? It validates their sort of transphobic worldview to some degree.
I agree with that, but I definitely agree that there are some people who are like, "Ha, tranny," but I feel like But it's one of those things that at the point when you start using it to describe yourself, the word loses its power in their hands, right? Like people.
Which, how many of you were in the early days of this sub? Am I the only one?
Well, I
started around the time you did.
Do you remember? Because in the early days, people would do that. Like literally, my first post, the reply was, "Your writing style sounds male." And I'm not making that up.
Was that just the early
days? We would do that stuff all the time. They'd be like, "Well, you're just what?"
No, I said, was that really just the early days?
You see?
Yeah, I still see that today. I don't know what you're talking about. Typical male.
But it was like endemic back in the day. Like back when we had a lot of really extreme transgender people and GCs on, and it was just like. Now we're all like lukewarm moderates. It's kind of boring.
I'm probably one of the. I'm probably one of the more extreme ones on the TT side. But, you know.
I think I've just warmed up to GC ideas, so a lot of the GC people don't seem as extreme to me anymore.
Yeah.
Well, it's like that thing when I've seen like trans fascism like say that trans people are social contagion. Everything else seems a little less like.
He is the caricature GC person.
Next time we gotta get trans fascism here.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
They will be a riot.
I want it. I want to discuss it with them.
I want Missy in here. Hi, Missy. I want trans fascism in here. I want to get fucking indecisive trans child in here. I want.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Can our next
fucking riot.
Can our next debate be like, instead of us, can we just schedule one with the like mods of gender critical and the mods of gender cynical?
Oh god.
That would be
We
so
get
would be
actual
fun.
gender critical people in here. Get like oh man, I forget her name. The old one.
Hey, just
Oh,
lesbian
end of the
things. Did want to let you know,
lineup.
PB.
End of the liner, yes.
Oh my God.
I actually get along with just lesbian things. Their username puts you off, but they're actually really cool.
Yeah, but
They've
they're saying you're
actually,
writing male, so just so you know.
Yeah.
But what
Like,
does a male writing style look like? I don't know.
What's a male what look like?
Writing style. Like, what is a male writing style?
I don't know, but what's really funny, right, is sometimes when I've posted my like moderate posts or when I'm just being contrary, because I like to be contrary, and I've made a point that's a bit more like TT than GC, I've had like replies that kind of imply that I wouldn't possibly know what I'm talking about because I'm not a woman. And I'm like, it's always quite amusing.
Well, I think that's a funny assumption on both sides because TT, for the most part, assumes that gender critical are female, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know.
And then-
The most outspoken gender critical person I talked to when I first got to the sub was a guy. Actually, I confused. Is it Parrish? I actually thought you were this person, but you weren't. What was it? Sojourner Truth? I think that's the person.
Oh, I had a discussion with them before about how platypuses kind of mess up our definition of mammal, but that was a fun talk.
Actually, the
I
fact that
missed it.
Sojourner Truth doesn't.
They were very vocal. Sojourner Truth.
The
Yeah.
fact that they're not on our sub anymore might be a bit of evidence that we're neutralizing.
Well, why do you think they left? Did we ever get a reason, or did they just disappear into the aether of the internet?
There was some kind of mod drama that happened like 9 months back, and they were kicked off at that time. They either kicked off or left.
Okay.
They got.
There was like I don't know if you've noticed, but we only have mod.
Sojourner Truth.
Oh, okay.
Hated saying natal, and so
We only have 2 mods, and one of the mods hasn't.
Isn't active
One of the
anymore?
mods hasn't posted in 6 months.
Yeah,
we used to have like 5 mods, and they all just got like purged. I don't know what the hell happened.
Can we get the backstory flop someday if you watch this?
I have no idea. It's something that happened behind the scenes. I just thought there was a post about it. I don't know.
Flap has to watch this because.
Flat,
She,
tell
you
us
know.
all the moddy secrets. Give us the
Yeah.
drama gossip. We need
I
it.
need
We
the-
want it.
It's so
if you
important.
hold on for a second. It seemed like Melissa wanted to say something, and kind of I know there's some lag with like internet issues. So Melissa, to talk about the Sojourner issue for a moment.
Now I have to remember what it was. Oh yeah, Sojourner. Yeah, you're just meant like you were only wondering like kind of why he's not around so much anymore. And I do remember that just before he left, he got into a huge fight with the mods about the natal thing. Like, I mean, I don't know if it's so much a huge fight, but he was being passive aggressive about it all the time, like intentionally making the word natal super small in his posts and whatnot. And then whenever anyone called him out on missing it once, he would blow up, and then the mods would tell him he needed to, and he would be like, "I hate this rule. I'm not going to say natal. It's not right."
I love
Wasn't he
it.
the reason that we got the non-negotiable thing in the sideline or the sidebar?
Yeah, that was literally it. Because he kept wanting that rule to be changed. He even made a thread. He made a thread.
Which
to
is
change
funny
that
because
rule.
I refer to I've never used the word natal. I always go with male and female, but I've never had anyone bother me.
Well, I mean, I think in part because the rules, I think the people who the rules are meant to keep from offending, they get a pass in saying those rules. Like you were saying, you can say MTT, but Missy could totally not say that.
Honestly, I really
Black people
don't.
in the N-word.
Yeah.
I feel mixed about the moderation of the sub. Like it needs to happen because it also keeps a lot of the extreme people that that wouldn't add to the discussion out. If you get what I mean. Like there are certain people who, the people who use MTT like regularly and would never give that up, are probably not the people who would be productive debaters. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
They've made up their minds.
I think it's just a stupid term, to be honest.
I really don't care. I think it's inaccurate, but whatever. If you want to describe me as that, do it. I dare
I think
you.
the language
The
rules
only
is like
reason
a
I kind
litmus
of like it is because, like, oh, both trans men and trans women are the T. It's like all of us are the same.
Yeah, we're slowly reaching this. I like it. It's like this concept of we're heading towards the same objective when we're actually not. But that's whatever. It's fine.
Same objective, different meeting points.
Yeah.
I mean, different points from me coming from.
Trans privilege, lol.
You know,
Yeah.
I think to some degree what the issue might illustrate is just the way people are very sensitive about having their use of language controlled to one degree or another. I don't know how close any of you have been following the sort of Jordan Peterson issue in Canada with Bill C-16 that's sort of making someone's refusal to use like non-binary gender-neutral pronouns a hate crime. And it's pretty crazy.
I find the whole Jordan Peterson like the dumbest thing ever. He has a statement which he says in which he outlines why he won't use they pronouns, and in his statement he uses they pronouns. It is like I don't even know what to make of him. It's just dumb.
Well, okay, so they pronouns. People who
If I
think
could
that,
find, if you want me to, I could find the quote. It's just.
I always feel about pronouns is there are valid reasons to like not use the right ones, and by valid I mean like oh, I messed up and I misspoke, right? Well, let's be honest, like using pronouns to me is like if someone changes their name, right? Like if my friend decided I don't want to be John anymore, I want to be Ben, right? And then I kept calling them John, that's kind of insensitive, right? That's not what they want to be called. It's the same thing to me.
I mean,
My
whereas a
limit
name,
is that I won't use the crazy things like sprout and Tumblr shit.
I normally stop at the Z ones personally. I'm like, really? Can we just not
This
use
is
like
why
they?
I haven't changed my name. I'm always Alex. Oh, forever.
See, but that's a gender neutral
Then
name.
no
so
one
you
could
just-
misgender me because it's not even possible.
See, that's a beautiful name.
I think part of the issue though is that these pronouns that we're talking about, I mean, yes, of course, they're the bizarre made up ones like Zims or bun self, the sort of Tumblr pronouns. But part of the fundamental issue is that these are.
I've never seen anyone that wanted to be called those though, like at all.
Well,
Yeah, I've never met someone who wants Z pronouns. Like, and most of the non-binary people I know in real life think they're dumb. So
hold
I
on
don't
a
know.
second.
I
me
went to a
mind finish
transgender
this.
convention a while back that was so like social justice warrior-y that they couldn't arrange their seats in a square like a lattice function because it might be oppressive, and I didn't see any Z pronouns there. So that's how uncommon it is.
Explain the seat square thing.
That's all.
Okay, you know how like
Tell
you're
us
in a
about the
classroom and you have
oppressive
like
lattice.
rows like a matrix? They
Yeah.
thought that was like somehow like restrictive of your mind or something. Like you have to have like this. So they made
Because
like
the
this
people in the
like,
front
these
versus the
weird
back?
swirly rows that went back and forth and like went into where like whirlpools.
I think it's actually just those people worship like the gods of chaos and can't handle a square. But whatever.
And I'm not making this. I actually was there and I was kind of making fun of them the entire time because it was kind of ridiculous. But in my entire experience there, I didn't see any Z pronouns. So
Well,
just goes to show.
part of the thing is this though, these alternative pronouns, they're third person pronouns, they're not second person pronouns. So like if I'm having a direct one-on-one conversation with any of you in this chat, I'm going to use the pronoun you or I or me when discussing whatever. But with the third person pronouns, if I'm referring to Peebles, for example, your Peebles, you'd be a she, but you would be sort of, I'm not talking to you when I use the word she, I'm talking to everyone else to sort of identify you out of the group. If you follow the logic at all?
Yeah, you're being spoken about in absence usually when people are using the gendered pronouns.
Exactly.
Yeah, it just.
So
the thing is though, I wonder if the Z pronouns and the stuff of that are post law, right? Of like they're just trolls making them, right? Or if that like there was one person who actually did it, and then from that point on, it was like trolls that just made it continue. Because I've never.
People are sincere.
I mean,
I think there's like probably one person who took it seriously. Because it's kind of like, have you ever noticed that like whenever you have like the list of non-binary genders, you see pangender?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever come across a pangender person? Have you, like, nowhere on the internet have I ever met a pangender person even. Not even the craziest people I've ever met. But it's always there, because I guess someone, when they were making this list, said they were pangender. So now it's on every single list of non-binary identities, even though no one identifies as it.
I've seen people
except for
on
maybe one person.
YouTube. I've seen people on YouTube sort of like describing themselves using these strange terms.
I'm just saying I've never seen it, but honestly, like I said, if someone wants to call themselves pangender, I'm okay with it, because once again, the amount of pressure it puts on me is use whatever pronoun they want, no matter how weird. Which, if I fuck up, as long as they're not like, you must be decapitated because you misgendered me on accident.
Violence.
I'm pretty okay with like attempting to use whatever makes people more comfortable. Of course, I am a bit of an asshole, especially to my closest friends, so they better expect me to give them shit about their weird pronouns at some point.
I think something I hear from GC people.
I also don't like the German pronouns, because it's kind of like we won that war. I don't want to be...
Melissa, could you say...
Slowly German nationalism is taking over us with non-gender pronouns.
What are you saying, Melissa?
Yeah, Melissa, you had something to say?
Yeah, I hear a lot of GC people on the pronoun issue. Basically, they kind of talk about how the pronouns to them are an expression of belief about the sex of somebody. And that to use somebody else's pronouns would be to kind of be saying, oh, hey, by the way, I believe that you're actually such and such a sex. And my response to that is, I feel like if that's the case, then is that how they use them in their actual everyday language? Whenever they say he or she, they're actually referencing somebody's genitals for no apparent reason?
Well, they are. That's all the pronoun means, in essence.
Well, I don't see why that's a very practical use of the language, I guess.
Exactly. Like, gendered pronouns in general are dumb, in my opinion.
It's dumb in the same way that always... It's dumb in the same way that always using a U after a Q is dumb. I mean, what's the point in that? It's just how it works.
But it has more real life like implications, because you use gendered pronouns all the time, and it directly references other people's sex in casual conversation.
This really doesn't matter though, because there are languages that have gender neutral pronouns, right? And
correct.
It's not the end of the world, right?
Yeah.
And languages evolve over time, so I don't know. Like,
as far as correctness goes, like, it's the difference between, say, putting the U after Q's is that we don't have words that would prefer you not to use a U.
There are words, but they are extremely rare. I mean, think of the word Iraq.
Yeah, but the idea being that, like, using a pronoun on somebody matters to them personally versus a spelling mistake. When it comes to spelling, yeah, you can invoke grammar rules and say, this is just the way it is. I'm not being bigoted. I'm just following rules. But when it comes to actual, like, interpersonal relationships, and you're, like, making a grammar rule more important than something that doesn't matter.
Yeah. Like, can you guys imagine if we had we had different pronouns for peoples with different sexualities?
Or different races.
Exactly. Like, what other class structure has different pronouns?
Well, not pronouns specifically, but we do refer to people with different, like, statuses by different surnames. Like, you have Mr., Mrs., Miss,
Ms.
Doctor.
Exactly, but a lot of those are dumb too.
What?
I mean,
Doctor-
even if you think they're dumb, the fact that we do currently use them means that there's some reason to use them correctly.
Exactly. Like, for instance, Mrs. and Ms. are two different titles, correct? Even though there aren't two different titles for Mr. But they're still considered important in everyday language because marriage as a social construction is considered important.
But shouldn't we be moving away from that? Because that's
Exactly. So we should get rid of all titles. That's my point.
We need to have an unmarried Mr.
Exactly.
No, I think we should move the opposite way. I think you shouldn't get a new title when you get married. Forget that.
Well, there's a lot of people who are just moving to Ms.
Ms.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of Ms. Like, you
Yeah,
listen
but
to
that's
actual...
Yeah.
Okay, by the way, I wanted to mention Trans Burner has met a pangender person. They were apparently a creepy ass cross-dresser. But
Right.
the ass part being on the creepy, but not the cross-dresser. Or wait, what? Or not
Let me
like
get my,
the creepy.
let me get my shit posting
Yeah.
profile on.
I was just saying because the chat said they wanted us to pay attention, so I'm paying attention to you, chat. I got you.
Where is the
Okay.
chat?
All right.
How
I
do
haven't even
see
looked
the
at the
chat?
chat.
Yeah, I
This
can't
thing.
see the chat either. I'm in the group chat, but I don't see.
You have to go. You have to go to PB's post on the video, and you have to watch
I
the stream. I just
Right,
muted
where-
and
where-
pause.
where?
Obviously.
Oh, so the chat's like on YouTube?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Can,
Oh, but then
Oh,
That's
that's gonna
right,
cause
that's
some
right.
echoes though if I do this.
where
and
is
then
it?
No,
have
you
to
have it paused
put
and
note,
muted.
Which would be tragic.
Can someone link me?
I don't think my internet's that good.
You can also pop out the chat so it becomes its own window. And yes, just lesbian things. I did notice you. You're the best, Kohai. I love the memes. I live for them.
Do we have any questions from the chat? Have they got questions for us?
Hello?
Do they
I
think
think
we're
there was
just
one
talking
towards the top.
shit?
Well, we are.
There was just
What if Sojourner Truth is in the chat?
Just lesbian things is in it, and she's pretty hardline GC. Maybe she can give us a question.
Yeah, give us a really hard question. Just lesbian.
Give us that
things.
hard-hitting question.
Yeah.
No pressure.
If you're looking for a question from the chat, I think the Trans Burner asked at the very top, who here would consider themselves to be true scum? I assume that's what it's.
yeah, that's me.
Oh, cool. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I've been on Tumblr doing the whole thing for about 5 years now, and it's basically against the whole thing that I said a bit earlier about people who they have a sort of thing about the social gender roles that they don't identify with, but they don't have the thing with their body. They don't need to transition, but that these kind of things are getting very blurred into the people who have dysphoria, need to change their body and all of that, even though they're two completely different issues. And by them being like smashed together as one, it's not really helping either group.
Right. I think part of the issue is if you look in the DSM-5 as to the criteria of what makes up gender dysphoria, it's sort of divided between psychological dysphoria as gender relates to your sort of social role, so to speak, and physiological dysphoria as, gender relates to your body. And it seems to me that to some degree, at least the idea of true scum is that a truly transgender person needs to experience some combination of both in order to really claim to have a transgender identity. And that if you just have one or another, you might, I suppose, fall into one of Blanchard's different typologies in some degree.
Most
that makes any sense.
type people haven't heard of Blanchard, just for get out there. I've been kind of introducing them to that.
I'm trying to relate two ideas together. Just the idea would be, I suppose, if you only experienced physical dysphoria, you have some sort of I don't know. I'm hearing an echo from someone for a moment. But you know, there's definitely a relationship between gender and sex, of course. And if you're adopting a transgender identity, it would almost appear as though you may have some sort of inner need to control your sexual orientation, if that makes any sense. So you're changing your body because I don't know. I suppose there could be some people who are self-hating homosexuals.
Are we still talking about true scum?
Yeah. So I'm trying to. The argument's kind of a little bit long here, but just the idea is. I don't know.
The true scum thing is very separate from sexuality. There's generally, almost always, people don't really think that there's any sort of like link in terms of what their sexuality means to
I guess
they're being trans.
I guess what I'm asking is what the fundamental question is, you know, what is the sort of absolute criteria by which you can truly, so to speak, say someone is or isn't trans?
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
The official line is that you need dysphoria, but what that means differs between people. My take on it is, if someone has a medical need to transition, then they're in the same situation as me. Whatever that really means to them in terms of dysphoria, but it's a separation from people who need to transition and people who don't.
Right, but I think part of the issue is your response doesn't entirely answer what I understand the question to be, at least, which is these people are saying there has to be some sort of absolute definitive criteria, and you're saying it's kind of a broad spectrum of, you know, of conditions. You know, one person may be in a situation where they don't really need to transition, and another person may be in a situation that's where it's more of a necessity. And
I think in anything you're always going to get some grey area cases that will be really tricky to say for that individual, but on an overall basis, by and large, you can say if you need to transition, it doesn't, you know, you will always have a bunch of questioning people and a bunch of people who aren't quite sure and a bunch of people who kind of need to, you know, and that complicates it a lot.
How do we define need, though? Because, like, I didn't need to transition. I could have just killed myself and I would have been just fine with that option too.
That's a very good point.
Then I'm saying need to mean that there's
well, if you're going to kill yourself, it comes to need. Like, biologically, the need for self-existence is before. It's kind of like the definition of life is to have homeostasis, I think.
Yeah, it's to have homeostasis, which is to keep, like, able to have boundaries, control, like, yeah, and it's. But I don't think I need to be alive. If I died, this world wouldn't be any different. I guess I wouldn't. If I had killed myself, I wouldn't be in this hangout right now.
It's getting fucking dark again. It's getting fucking dark. Transburner on the chat says, I'm personally fine with people claiming transgender identities in the non-Truscum way. Truscum, but tomato. But I think it's fundamentally different in a lot of ways from the transsexual condition. So, at a minimum, if transgender is going to mean what it currently seems to, then transsexual needs to come back.
Yeah, I
agree with that.
I've changed
like
to using
transsexual.
I do not consider myself transgender anymore. I only consider myself transsexual.
Ditto.
I actually like transsexual before I even started hormones. Like, I just think it's a better word to use for binary transgender people.
I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the
distinction
word.
Seems useful.
I can get why
Like,
the distinction. Yeah.
like I view like transgender as the umbrella term. It includes like non-binaries and binary transgender people, and then like binary transgender people get to be called transsexuals. That's how I kind of think.
No,
about
I disagree because there's some
Okay.
binary transgender people that don't transition or don't transition fully, and to me, they aren't transsexual.
That is true. It is a bit of a murky term, I will admit. Generally, binary transgender people would be considered transsexual since they do more stuff medically. But yeah, you are right there. I'll concede that.
Okay, I have a question. So I don't identify as a woman or as the opposite sex or whatever, but by that definition, I am transsexual. I am transsexual. So therefore, am I not transgender? I don't know if that made sense, but
I mean, yeah, but that is only if you. These are definitions that only exist in my head, so don't take offense to them.
I'm offended, PB. I'm over. I'm about to leave, honestly. I can't handle the level of offense.
It's just my way of categorizing things, since the transgender community doesn't like categorization. You're a bunch of postmodernist asswipes.
Yeah, I'm an asswipe. Honestly, call me that from now on. Anytime you refer to me, feel free to call me an asswipe.
Is that your new preferred pronoun?
No, it's just my new preferred name. I might go make an automatic called asswipe. I feel like it's gonna be taken, but maybe I can use like an @ sign and then 2 5s.
That'll be totally elite.
I don't think this chat is long enough to discuss issues with postmodernism, so let's just leave that alone.
We need to have another one of these. I'm really enjoying this.
Have we got any more questions, Maud?
Have we answered a question yet?
I don't even know what the fuck we're talking about anymore. I'm lost.
I know there was a question on political stuff because I asked that.
What was that question?
Like, what's your politics?
Right.
That's pretty vague.
I don't know. Like, are you a socialist, a liberal, or whatever? Like to sit on fences? I don't know what to.
I sit on every fence possible, but actually I'm an egalitarian and I do believe in some socialist ideas. But yeah.
The only fence I sit on is between Marxism and anarchism. I think we need a healthy mix of anarchy and state.
I actually think both are dumb, but that's a different conversation.
How mix anarchy and state?
I guess you just said you sit on the same fence I do because I think anarchy is dumb and I think Marxism is dumb. So I guess I sit on that fence too.
That's the only fence I sit on. I'm extreme in every other aspect of my life.
Give me one of your extremes. I need to know.
Besides between Marxism and communism. I'm actually, bizarrely a moderate on the radical left.
Honestly, okay, so on a side note, Just Lesbian Things did get us that hard-hitting question we wanted. How would you define the word woman? So...
I'm going to go to the bathroom for this.
Look at PV ditching.
You go piss, and I'm going to say something infuriatingly moderate. I take it to mean adult female person. However, I'm totally relaxed and happy about, transgender women using that word to describe themselves and see no problem with that. I think that our language has enough flexibility and nuance, and that transgender women are right in using that word to describe themselves because, yeah. So
I honestly wouldn't even say that's moderate because I agree with it.
I think I'll be even more infuriatingly moderate then. I just straight up don't have a definition. I know what the people I'm talking to, like how they'll interpret it, and so I just use whatever word fits.
Whatever they'll use?
Yeah.
Fucking Tommy. I'm reading chat, so whenever I say random statements like fucking comedy, just lesbian things said that. So
I find it really bizarre, I think, in sort of like in the real world in conversation, if someone who's a trans woman who sort of presents in that way then didn't refer to themselves as a woman. I think I'd find that quite sort of like unnatural and a bit weird.
Exactly, but that's because of how society is structured, and we have our understanding of what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman.
We do, but is it fair to sort of expect transgender people to kind of burn down that particular structure?
No, it isn't, and it's not fair to expect them to have different standards compared to what cis people are expected to uphold.
That's
so like
where I'm at with it.
Yeah, so like for instance, I identify as a man or a male, but I never do in front of other people because it's very, very confusing for them, right? Like it's not practical in day-to-day life.
See, but I take a stance that I guess when I opened with saying I'm anti-gender critical, I'm actually a lot of the stated ideals of gender critical I do believe in. Like I really wish for a society where you could identify as a man, right? And that was not a problem. You know what I mean?
Then that's what we should be working towards. We shouldn't be working towards accepting trans women as women. We should be...
No, but that's the thing, is you want to identify as a man, right? So you should be able to have that, but I want to be able to identify as a woman and call myself a woman, which that's when we're talking about two different things, is I think we can have the best of both worlds, where people just do their own thing and no one cares.
I understand that, but gender as a concept in general is harmful in my opinion.
But then what is, like, okay, so I like to talk about in-game. Like, in-game for you, your political movement would never happen, right?
It hopefully will someday.
Sorry, I just got bombarded by a bunch of dogs.
What's the question exactly again?
And a toddler.
I mean, I get where GC are coming from when they say that they feel a word that they think is important in defining themselves is being erased, and they find that very difficult. I do.
Yeah.
But I just think it's not practical, and it's not fair to trans people to sort of like be that rigid about the way we use language.
Sorry, the nephew's over, so.
What was the question again? I'm a bit lost because I went to go to the bathroom and get food.
I forgot. I don't know what we're talking about either because I just took away.
Define woman.
We were talking about the definition of women.
Made fun of me.
There was actually a question posted to the subreddit sort of about this a couple of days ago.
What was the chat?
Which was, do non-trans women do non-trans by default women and trans women refer to different things when they call themselves women? Was sort of a related question posted to the subreddit recently.
I think
my response is the same response I gave in the thing. By the GC definition, trans men are women, and by that doesn't really make any sense according to that question. How could that be a thing?
Well, I think Callie actually brought up
women who refer to themselves by the same terminology that transgender women do talk to themselves by. It's contradictory.
Right. And I think, I think the question really illustrates maybe the more important issue, which is what Callie sort of brought up when she said sort of the issue of erasure, that by using the same terminology, sort of one group is sort of marginalizing the original sort of function of the category, women essentially being, I guess a group of human beings that can procreate and, the experience of sort of different social rules and norms being established around controlling women's sexuality in that capacity.
Well, can we first step aside and mention that there's already a big exception in that, and that's intersexual people, right? They are already an exception that's accepted as, you know.
And I think we have to look at a lot of other exceptions too.
People now?
Huh?
I am surprised.
What?
Go ahead.
Oh, I had nothing else to say. Sorry.
But on the exceptions, I think we have to look at what people actually do use in the exceptions. It's not even just intersex people. It's, you know, that someone might say get into a car accident and have their penis lopped off. You know, are they less of a man because they now don't have their penis? You know, there's people in quite a lot of different situations like that, and how we generally, as far as I can tell, how we generally define them is if they've got some sex characteristics of that sex and consider themselves to be that sex and live as that sex, close enough, and then we call them, you know, a man or a woman. So if we do that for other grey area cases, that's the way that I would see it being done for trans people. Yes, people are a little bit in-betweeny on sex post-transition, but just if we use the same criteria as we use for other in-betweeny-ish cases. Yeah.
All right, but my issue with that is, why is it bad to have separate categories that are more accurate? Like, why is there the need to define them into either man or woman? Why is that a good thing?
Yeah, are we talking about sex or gender right now?
Sex. Kind of gender too.
Well, for sex, it's kind of like apparent. That's just, we need words to describe the organ functions of certain, like half the population versus the other half of the population.
No,
but we don't.
We don't need a word to describe that.
Lost their penis, yeah. If someone has lost their penis, but they are still otherwise male, we call them male. We call them a man. We don't care about it.
There's more to male or femaleness than just the genitals. I mean, it's encoded throughout the entire body.
And that's when we get into the grey areas where we say, close enough.
But yeah, but my point is, why not just have them be a gray area or a separate category? What is the purpose or the goodness that comes of shoving them into either male or female?
I don't think they're really.
Are we talking about intersex people or a guy who lost his penis right now?
Or a post-op transsexual? Anyone who's not easily.
Look, I think
Well,
why
I mean,
don't we have more than just two categories, because we clearly have more than just two kinds of body.
Exactly.
I think it's just another. That's how society does things. Like it is. Well, why do we have gendered pronouns? It's just how it's kind of done.
Exactly, and that's dumb.
Well, I don't know. Like, no matter what I do, even if I went full like surgery every part of my body, I'm still gonna have a prostate. Like, there's only so much I could ever do. I still have male.
Yeah, then you're a male to female transsexual, or whatever other terminology.
Well, I'm not entirely sure what point you're trying to make here. Then
I'm saying, why is it important to be a woman rather than a transsexual?
Okay, I think I can maybe answer that question. So maybe forgive me a little bit as I stumble through it. The way I see the issue is that there is a binary categorization within human beings, and that binary is whether or not you can procreate, whether or not you can reproduce new human beings. So people who can do that are women, and people who can't do that are men. However, I will note here, and I think this is probably what justifies and sort of validates the whole concept of transgender identities to some fundamental degree, is that to define women by whether or not they can have children or, you know, should have children to some capacity is inherently sexist. You know, there are plenty of women who, you know, natal women who cannot, you know, due to some sort of, I I don't know, polycystic ovarian syndrome or something, you know, cannot get pregnant, and, you know, to not call them women would be just wrong. And so, you know, the thing is, they still, these natal women still fulfill a sort of, they're perceived by others as women, and they sort of perform within society as women, so to speak. And in the same way, a lot of transgender people who pass also fulfill that sort of criteria. It strikes me as the way we use terms is inherently, it's more based on our perception than the actual reality. So, you know, there's the old saying.
Sorry, I keep on asking this. Are you referring to gender right now or to sex?
Sort of both at the same time. So
see, that's where I disagree with you.
Well, hold on. Let me give you just a quick example to try and illustrate what I'm talking about. So if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, you know, is it really a duck? I mean, geese are not ducks, but they look like ducks and they seem to quack like ducks. They're very similar and they're almost indistinguishable to an extent. So, you know, would it really? I guess what I'm asking is it fundamentally wrong to call a goose a duck? If I still know, you know, you're referring to the object in question, if I understand what you're sort of talking about.
It's, yeah, okay, that's a good analogy because it lets me break it down a little. So if you define a goose as a duck, then you're saying a duck is defined by quacking and looking like a duck, right?
Right.
Which isn't necessarily true of all ducks.
See, exactly.
And the other problem with it is that in using that word to talk about geese, you're if the geese are oppressing the ducks, then you're taking away the ducks' ability to talk about themselves as an oppressed class, as defined by their ducking.
We joke, but that is a good point.
Yeah, because you're arguing away
there are functional uses for these separations we make. I know I always make this on the forum, but like you have salt water and fresh water, and then you have brackish water in the middle, and there's a spectrum, and you have salmon that swim back and forth. But at the end of the day, if you take your goldfish and throw it in the ocean, it's gonna die from too much salinity. Like, there are reasons why we have the description of freshwater and description of saltwater, and it's not like they're just arbitrary categorizations we just made up as humans.
Then what is the purpose of the term male and the purpose of female to you, in reference to humans particularly?
I think it refers to a cluster. The best way I could describe it is like a cluster concept of different traits. You can't strictly define it by anything, because if you try to define it by chromosomes, if you try to define it by organs or certain traits, because you could have like XY people. I forgot the name. You could have XY chromosome people, and then they'll produce estrogen. So it's hard to define these things, but it's kind of like a certain category of traits describes maleness and describes femaleness, and they have practical uses in reality. Just because you can't come up with a strict, hard definition doesn't mean there aren't definitions in the wild that we need to relate to. Just like you can't strictly define freshwater or saltwater because salmon swim between, doesn't mean you could throw your goldfish in the ocean. Hello?
Yeah, I'm listening. I get what you're saying, right? And that's why I think I've never heard a trans person argue that someone who is non-transgender has never been on estrogen and is in every term just a normal cis man want to refer to them as a woman, right? Normally it's on some degree of whether it's gender identity as their defining factor of what is a woman, or, you know, starting transition or whatever, right? There isn't something of I don't know. I guess
I actually disagree with you on that. I consider before when I was in the closet, wasn't on hormones, didn't even realize I was transgender in any aspect. I do consider I was a woman at that point. I know that seems nonsensical, but that's just how I have to categorize it.
See, and that's where I would somewhat agree. I mean, obviously, I do think that gender identity is the most important factor of what someone is, right? And I find, and just on the edge side note, the gender critical people like, well, I don't have a, gender identity. So reminds me of so many people I've seen who are homophobic saying, well, I don't have a sexuality, I'm just normal, right? Which it's a little more complicated, but I just find it funny when things remind me of other things.
I think part of the issue with the gender critical people as it relates to, the statement, I don't have a gender identity. I think what is really meant by that is that they don't have at least an internal sense of a gender identity. That their gender identity is a more social sort of thing. Like, I consider myself, at least when I first joined the sub, I was definitely more towards the GC side. I've sort of come to the middle now. I can't really claim that I have a internal sense of, maleness myself, being a male, but when I go out within society and interact with people, I definitely do experience that I am treated in a certain way that seems to be consistent with the way other men are treated.
I wouldn't expect non-trans people to have a sort of gender identity, because I only see gender identity as really meaning a need to transition, and I wouldn't expect someone to have this identity of their sex any more than they had an identity of any other physical characteristic.
The main trans narrative, as I understand it, is that cis people's gender identity matches their sex, right? And thus they don't have gender dysphoria, and thus for the most part they wouldn't notice it, right? But when they get mismatched, right, when they're not aligned right, that's when you get gender dysphoria, and that's when you get the need to transition.
Yeah, that's the kind of line that I follow.
But then where is gender identity in that?
It's just the sex that you don't end up killing yourself if you're as it.
What are we exactly discussing here? I'm a bit lost.
We sort of started off with just lesbian things, saying like what's a woman, how do you define a woman? Yeah. Then we talked about ducks a bit. Now the chat's talking about campfires. It's just weird.
I've been trying to sort of bring the topic around to just the general question of gender identity and what it is, given that that is one of the questions that was presented in the subreddit thread.
I did partially joke about the campfire thing, but it's something I take from a sociology book I read a few years back, where they were listing different sex roles that occur in primitive societies.
Right.
And one of the few sex roles that existed in all primitive societies that women do was make campfires and collect firewood. There were even societies where women hunted and all sorts of other things. It was like the only universal.
That's pretty interesting, actually.
Which is kind of bizarre, because in our modern world, there's like a conception that like men are supposed to make campfires, which is kind of amusing, because if it is the only gender universal, that you're completely going the opposite of that.
Right, definitely. Gender roles as they relate to sort of social roles change over time. I think part of that would part of the reason why you might see a reversal in today's society might have to do with technology, would be my guess, if you were to think of it in that way.
That is true. This kind of gets down. I think I've talked this on the sub. I think of gender in like a very primitive sense. Like it's almost like a mental, like way back in the day kind of thing.
I don't have an appendix, you nerd.
You have an appendix?
I don't have an appendix. I got that thing yanked out after it tried to kill me. The fucker.
Oh, okay.
Does that make you non-binary then?
I'm actually a appendix. Thank you very much.
There you go.
Because like I view it as like in nature, like it's kind of hard to deny that, like, for example, like male lions and female lions will behave differently. Almost all animals are sexually dimorphic. I don't know if I said that correctly. And while this is not pronounced in humans, in fact, there's a lot of evidence that we don't even make pheromones, kind of thing. It's not. It's kind of like magical thinking to think it's like completely non-existent in humans. That's why I said I think it relates to a very primitive aspect of our psychology that probably has no relevance to how we live and act in today's world.
Then why is it relevant?
Because it exists. I mean, there's different moons for the names. There's like Saturn has all these different moons, and they'll never relate to anything you ever do in your life. But Saturn has a certain number of moons, and they exist. That's just the fact of the matter.
You are theorizing as well that, like, you know,
I mean,
this gender appendix thing can basically.
I mean, it is partially like I am partially theorizing, but it's kind of hard for me to think. Like, I think the default it is the default position, because otherwise you have to think that almost magically there is no difference behavior-wise between men and women and humans. And like, at what point did that happen? Like it doesn't make any sense to think that we're like complete blank slates upon birth, and that we're like magically everything is socialized.
So
that's understandable, but a lot of behavior in animals that seems gendered actually isn't once they're removed from like social settings, right? Like, if you take
all animals have social settings.
No, but that's what I'm saying, like
Melissa
lions and stuff.
Say some stuff. Would you guys let Melissa?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Melissa, go ahead. It sounded like you wanted to respond to something people said.
Let's see. I was basically kind of getting at that. Like, someone had asked why it mattered, because PB was kind of going all like, well, it's just an appendix thing. It doesn't really matter. And I was just clarifying, like, it still matters in that it would be the reason why some people are transgender, like when it goes wrong. Like, your appendix doesn't matter until it goes wrong.
Yes, exactly. That's my whole point, is that it doesn't really matter unless it's dysfunctional. And that's kind of that's how I view transgender people. We're the result of this entire almost evolutionary forgotten process at this point going a misfire.
All right, like, I understand that. Like, I believe there is some biological component to being trans, but that doesn't mean you are the opposite sex. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, just because you have a dysfunctional gender organ doesn't mean it's the other gender organ.
Well, no, but then
that's assuming that there is a gender organ.
Let's theorize this for a second. I'm a transhumanist, right? So I can't wait until I can get uploaded into my robot body and shoot missiles and laser eyes, right?
Yeah.
Until then, I'm stuck in this meat fucking sack. But either way, I believe, honestly, at one point we will be able to do a full transition from one sex to the other, right?
Yeah.
Then at that point, does transgender people become the other? Like, because I've seen some gender critical people argue that no, even if you could change your chromosomes, even if you could have fully functioning sex organs, you still wouldn't be female, right?
Well, you would still have a different lived experience.
But so does every woman on the planet.
That's very true, but you will never have what they share in a way.
But what do they share? Give me one thing every woman universally shares.
Born with a uterus and ovaries?
Intersex women. Some are born without uteruses
then they are not women. They're intersex.
What if they identify as women? And would you say they're not women because they?
But then we're back to identifying as rather than being.
Exactly.
Well, no, they were raised their whole lives as women. No one's ever told them they're not a woman before, and then they get a medical test at age 25 and find out that they were born without a uterus.
So
that just means they were wrong.
Yeah.
This is why I sort of proposed the question earlier, that if something looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, then it is a duck. I think the problem that this back and forth has right here is that you can't really approach the question, the issue, by talking about what this group of people, this category, women, all share in common. You know, really what the category is not women, but people who other people perceive to be women, and how that relates to them being treated. You know, if you look at, I'm not entirely, read up on my history and what have you, but I think during around the Victorian era, it used to be common practice for people to dress up little boys as sort of girls. You have the whole sort of Goldilocks sort of phenomena, the stereotype of, a little boy dressed up with maybe a huge lollipop or something of that nature, looking like a little munchkin.
That's not really something like that happened at that time. That was all of human history until like 1910.
Right, and what I'm saying is that might, I think even in the Muslim world, it's fairly common to treat or to think of little boys as being equivalent to women, and so they're treated differently in accordance to that sort of social standard, so to speak.
I think it might be the other way around on that, and that women just tend to get treated like children in most places.
Yeah, I was going to say that too.
Yeah, I think we're talking about two groups that are considered basically, in some places, they don't have rights. So.
Right. Well, I guess what I'm saying is the whole category to me seems to be, just very intimately connected within society. I guess my hypothetical here to sort of advance a dialectic would be, is it possible to construct a transgender identity outside of a social context? So if I were a person, raised by a pack of wolves, so to speak, would it be possible for me to adopt some sort of would it be possible for me to adopt a transgender or transsexual identity within that sort of, does that make any sense if you follow sort of scenario?
Is this addressed to me or someone else?
Just to everyone.
You go first.
Go for it, From.
I'm definitely sure some people would still be dysphoric regardless of their upbringing, but I don't think if you were raised in a genderless society, you would be transgender. You would just be transsexual or dysphoric because you wouldn't identify with another gender.
I think at this point we're just. Well, I think at this point we're just disagreeing about definitions.
Part of what I'm saying though is if you're not raised within a society.
Well, even if you're raised outside of a society, and I think we talked about this earlier, that we all pretty much believe more or less that there's some innate part of being gender dysphoric, right? More or less, we all said to some degree that has an innate element, right?
Mm-hmm.
I disagree.
Tell us, Parrish. Tell us where you disagree. Tell us.
Expand on that.
Come on, GC. Come on, we need a hard GC here, Parrish.
Go, Parrish. It's your moment.
What, like elaborating on my disagreement?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as innateness is concerned, I'm sure there's something in the same way there is for like depression or whatever that makes you more prone to it. But at the end of the day, even with the number of trans people that I have known and that I've spent an inordinate amount of time with, most of it just seems to boil down to like something social. For example, if you were raised by a pack of wolves on a remote island, on a different planet, and you never spoke to another human being, how would you even know anything about the other sex for you to like with, or to say, oh wow, this is wrong
So
in
do you
relation
not?
what?
Well, just one interruption. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like humans do have body maps, right? And
I don't think they work quite the way that the QT side likes to say.
well, no, because okay, I really enjoy sucking dick, right? I really enjoy it. I really like men in general. I like in particular though the dick, right? So did I learn that behavior because I wasn't born with an innate knowing of what a dick is? If we follow your logic,
I would guess that most behavior that doesn't directly feed into like, living, such as breathing, eating, crap like that, would probably be at least in part learned.
eating is pretty learned.
Procreation is something that comes naturally to us, right? Just by virtue of the fact that that's kind of what everything is designed to do, right?
But me sucking dick has nothing to do with procreation.
Like for example, like I mentioned before, like different animals. Maybe the lion example was a poor one, but like for example, like anglerfish, male anglerfish and female anglerfish act completely different. Like the male anglerfish pretty much is like 1/8 the size and just ends up like as a parasite in the female one its whole life and just that's like absorbed into it. But like the notion. That's how I kind of view it. Like it is something on that level. Like it is a very basic drive that I don't have any control over. It's just something built.
I think that the issue when,
Nothing. I was making a joke.
Oh, unfortunately, I have no sense of humor.
Well, that's a tragedy.
It is.
How really?
No, but I think the issue with comparing the way that you see different behavior between sexes and animals with humans is that at the end of the day, humans are animals, but they're also like rational, self-aware animals. Like to go to the anglerfish example, if you look at the way that they behave that way due to actual like physical differences. Like the anglerfish basically turning into a parasite for the female is based on the fact that biologically that's how they're set up to reproduce, right?
Yes. But what I'm trying to say is that humans are like us being very very similar biologically between males and females. Like us only being like a foot taller, males only being like a foot taller, for example, is kind of new. Like to compare us to chimpanzees, for example.
But don't forget about the sort of behavioural differences that are influenced by hormones.
Yeah, testosterone causes more violent behavior and such. But
well, can I finish?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, like for example, like female chimpanzees, they don't have periods. They have a dedicated what is that like a dedicated heat for like a month where I'm not exaggerating this. You could look up pictures yourself. Their ass literally swells up and their skin shapes off and becomes red. And they are our closest human relatives. And that is the level of sex behavior differences they have.
Wait, women don't do that?
Well, I don't know. I've never seen a woman's ass turn red and their skin shape off.
I was talking about how much I know about women, but I was pretty sure they did that trick.
But like, just because an animal is our closest relative doesn't mean we share the most behavior with it. Like
No,
dogs.
I'm not trying to say that. What I'm trying to say is that I feel like, not, I guess feel is the wrong word, but I think it's you can make a pretty strong case that some kind of level of innate difference that, even though we're very similar now, is just like hardwired into us. As I said, it's like a mental appendix. And it's kind of hard for me not to see that when you compare us to even our closest relatives that have such a big difference in some aspects. Where,
so is this behavior-wise?
Well, yeah. I mean,
but
they
there's
literally
such
have a month-long heat for once a year.
I mean, like on a human level, are you talking about behavior or some kind of gender identity?
Humans, this is almost completely non-existent. It does, like, it's not a factor in how we work or how we do anything.
Does a month-long heat actually count as behavior? That seems like it still falls.
If it doesn't count as behavior, I don't know what does count as behavior.
But that's like a phenotypical thing, like a period or an erection.
Yeah, I guess what they're wanting for behavior is like mating rituals. So like when the birds that dance do that and such, like to attract mates.
But even that is largely learned a lot of the time.
Well, for example, when you gave me the example of the anglerfish, you said that these differences came about because of like differences in biology.
Right.
And I just pointed to our closest relative having behavior differences relating to part of their biology. And then you keep on relating it with like, just for example, like differences in like masturbation and periods for even modern contemporary humans.
I mean, I think I get what you're saying. Okay, let me see if I can figure it out real fast, because I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. But, so what you're saying is that you're kind of find it hard to believe that when even our closest living relatives have like some sort of gendered behavior built into them, it seems odd to say that humans just aren't affected by this at all. Like, we may not really do much with it, like an appendix, but it's still there.
Like, I know, for example, I mentioned earlier pheromones. Like, we actually do produce pheromones, but we don't have the organ. There's an organ that's supposed to be between your eyes, right next to the brain, that it detects the scent of pheromones, and that is like shriveled up to almost nothing in humans, to the point where it can't detect anything. But we actually do produce them. They just don't do anything to us anymore. It's almost like we've been like pressured, like evolutionarily, to be very similar. It's kind of bizarre, actually.
I think that might be just as a result of us kind of moving away from the evolve this or die kind of thing. Like, when you don't really need something in order to survive, it becomes vestigial and ends up just dying off.
Well, it's not because you don't need it, but it's because people with the weaker pheromone detectors could get mates, right? And pheromone production.
Well, I
right?
imagine that the reason it shrunk is you're correct. If we were detecting pheromones, our society probably wouldn't function. Because actually, I don't think our society would function if
I think it would. I think
had a month-long heat and we were all spouting pheromones all the time.
I honestly wish you spouted pheromones. I want some of those sweet pea pheromones. Do you think like pheromones have? Sorry, I had to say it. It was brought up. Do you think pheromones at all related and like our lack of production of? I guess you said we produce them. We can't pick them up anymore, right?
Yeah, we don't smell them.
Yeah, we don't.
I think Hank Green has a good video about it. There's like a whole pseudoscience around like human pheromones, and like,
I don't smell
trying
anything.
to use them for seduction, but it doesn't work because the organ that we have to do it doesn't function anymore. We produce them; they just don't do anything.
I don't smell anything, so I'm glad we don't do pheromones, actually.
Well, that's the idea. You literally don't have the organ to do it.
No,
It's all
I don't
shriveled
have
up.
a sense of smell, so I couldn't smell pheromones even if that organ wasn't.
Oh,
shriveled
okay.
up.
Sorry.
Yeah. I really wish. So I want to see that alternate timeline where humans kept their pheromones.
So I just wanted to let everybody know we're getting about 2 hours and 45 minutes in. So I don't know how long everyone plans on staying, but I personally would recommend going under 3 hours since it's being uploaded. So
I'll need to go very shortly anyway. It's almost midnight.
Maybe we could take one more question or something as a closing.
Yeah. I wanted to maybe go over. We kind of went over it at the beginning a little bit. Just sort of housekeeping issues when it comes to the GCQT sort of subreddit. Something I wanted to propose, because I've definitely very much enjoyed this hangout with all of you, and I'm sure there'll be enough listeners who will have liked it as well. Are any of you familiar with Discord?
Yeah.
I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if
like AIM.
Yeah, but it's voice chat, and I was just wondering if it's ever been maybe discussed or thought of having a Discord server, because I think it might be fun to, on occasion, have users go on and speak to each other voice to voice rather than
I'm not against it.
elaborate text talks.
My personal preference is I don't like services like that. I've tried using them in the past and I don't find them engaging. So if that existed, I don't know how I'd use them.
I'd imagine it would sit idle most of the time, but it would also be good just for organizing things really ad hoc. Like there was a lot of organizing that went into this, and it wouldn't be necessarily that hard.
That is true. I had to plan. I planned this out like a literal month in advance. Like I'm actually really lucky this actually worked out. Only one person.
You did a really good job. We need to say thank you for that, because you did an awesome job with it. Thank you.
Big thanks to people.
Thank you. I kind of felt bad because I was just like pestering your inbox full of messages for like a month.
No, you did really good.
Especially getting people together with schedules.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel really bad for questioning TW because they could have worked out, but I had it arranged and I only found out last minute they couldn't do it. I'm like, I really can't reschedule this because it is literally like 2 days before this.
Yeah, I hope next time we can get more people on. They can see that it didn't go bad, right? And they can.
we need more of these. It's been really good.
I don't know if I really want more people on because it was kind of like I think this is actually like the perfect number right here. Maybe like one more person to balance it out.
Yeah.
I don't want more people because then it just become like a mess. I want different.
Yeah, see, and I agree with that. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like I want different people. Maybe we can shift it up. I don't know.
It might.
I'm always up to do this again.
Yeah, it might be nice to have this be like a regular thing that people can sign up for. Like have it be either once or twice a month, every first or second Saturday, or first or third Saturday, something like that. Where we can maybe go through some of the topics of the week that have come up in the subreddit and maybe hash them out more elaborately, so to speak. Or if there's any two users who are having a disagreement of particular intensity, it might be a space that they can more thoroughly
It's a very good reminder that you're talking to actual other people, isn't it, with
absolutely
feelings and real lives behind all this ideology. I think it's really necessary when we're talking about such polarized ideology.
See, I don't know why, but I've never had that problem of being like.
I have had that problem, I will admit. I have demonized GCs in the past.
Well, now I know who's supposed to read with British accent.
The most important.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Melissa was saying she knows who's supposed to read in British accents.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
All of them, because
that's
it's so much more civilized, and you must drink tea at the same time.
Yeah, there you
so.
I must be a bad prick because I don't like tea.
About like
I don't drink tea either, but I really like crumpets.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
because like some things in America are just so shit, and then like a lot of British people like no offense to you, but you'll act like it's 10 years in the future. That's like what it comes off to me as. Like you guys are like 10 years in the future socially and everything.
Oh yeah.
Well, don't they?
That's because we've got socialized healthcare.
Yeah, but ironically,
now.
the ironic thing is, last comment. Well, I don't know if this is gonna be the last comment, but healthcare for transgender people is actually better in the United States because of private healthcare. Because you could just privately get medication, while in Britain and other such countries you have to be on a huge waiting list.
But you can
get privately
private
get it too.
I got my testosterone privately to begin with.
Oh,
and
you
then,
can still get it privately? I didn't know
yeah,
that.
because you can actually, like, how I did it was I went privately to get the prescription. So initially paid up and then got it off my GP, i.e. on national healthcare, from my initial private prescription.
Yeah, we have private healthcare in the UK, but we also have socialised healthcare, and it's basically a choice which one you use.
Oh.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
It's cool, and that's the
I
system
didn't know that.
in the US, but cough.
It's actually making it a little bit less now.
Issues like these would definitely be great to discuss more in depth, like on a hangout in the future. I know there was a question posted on the sub, like 2-3 weeks ago, about whether or not transitioning, procedures should be offered as as part of a public healthcare plan.
Yeah,
and,
that would be great to discuss. That would be a really good one.
That had some heated responses to it.
Yeah, I actually found myself not getting heated, which I expected me to get heated at least once, but this was really chill.
I got heated when talking about chimpanzee butts.
I got heated when I talked about the global orgy just because y'all don't see my vision. I'm a visionary, I tell you. I'm dying.
Right, shall we say so long, farewell, and all that shit there?
Yeah.
Prepare for the shitstorm of comments after.
Oh boy.
Oh, I'm personally prepared for.
Getting closer to the gender
Oh, it's gonna be on Gender Critical and Gender Cynical.
Oh my God.
everywhere. They're all gonna hate us.
Crazy people.
I'm gonna be banned
just because
from
we've
everywhere.
said that, actually, everyone's just gonna be like, meh.
Yeah.
We
Just
are listening to this shit for 3 hours.
You think they're gonna make it to the end of this? Everyone's already left.
Oh god.
Everyone's already stopped watching.
I know there's like provocative YouTube videos that like if you watch after the first 10 seconds, you'll realize that it wasn't what it is. People will still say the same shit in the comments.
I mean, the chat's bored of us.
don't
They're
watch
just
the whole
talking
thing.
about furries. You know?
Yeah.
Can we have
All right.
can our next discussion be about furries? I'm gonna
Furries and the relationship
on the panel.
because there are a lot of furries in the other way around. Transgender people in the furry community.
I've never met one.
I know someone who draws furry art.
I don't consider myself a furry. I don't identify as such. Alright.
I know someone who draws furry art, so they're one of my good friends, so it's good.
I actually like the conventions more than the anime conventions.
I've never been to a convention, so obviously they're just bad.
Oh, alright.
Right. Let's end on that note.
Maybe.
Any last comments before I press the button and this goes on YouTube?
No, but I mean, a toast to Peebles.
Yeah, thanks for getting it together.
Yes,
thank
One
you.
last thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
You're the best.
Alright.
Catch you all on GC Debates QT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Indeed.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.